Hey, Commissioners, just so you know, we're now recording and the meeting is streaming to the YouTube channel. Just give us one more minute and Charlie will be ready to start. I'll let you know.
Yeah, and I just want to get that agenda that you want me to come get that?
That is what I'm waiting on.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Y'all didn't notice, I just poured water all over my desk, which is nice considering we had a false fire alarm an hour ago. And now I've poured water all over my desk. This is the kind of afternoon we have.
That's what it was, right? There's a few more here. That's where these were strays that belong to the staff.
Okay.
I can order.
Okay, thank you.
Charlie?
Oh, great, thank you.
So, Philip is still making that handy one that has like the roll call, all the commissioners' names.
Okay, but this is, this
So that's
gives
just
me,
the agenda.
okay, that's good.
So, but if you want to go ahead and get started, we have some, Christopher's got to go through all the protocol and stuff.
Right.
And I have some updates about the city plan.
Okay.
So by the time we're all done with that, then I should have that roll call for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get going?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I hope everyone's with me. I've been told we can go ahead and get started. The staff is ready. I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 15th meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. I'd like everyone to know that the commission members are volunteers appointed by Charleston City Council. And for the record, I'm going to read who's in attendance via Zoom for the meeting this afternoon. Donna Jacobs, Angie Johnson, Harry Lassane, Sean Flug, Jimmy Bailey, Sunday Lempesis, and Erica Harrison. The way we run a meeting is, I'll, as chairman, my name's Charlie Carish, will read an item into the, for the record, and then I'll ask staff to present that item to us and make a recommendation. At that time, after that, we'll hear from the applicant. Then we'll hear from anybody that's in favor of the application, then anyone opposed to the application. Then we'll let the applicant respond if he'd like to any oppositions, any final comments. Then we'll close the public hearing aspect of this, and then commission members will discuss, make a motion, and we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Morgan, would you like to introduce any staff that's going to be presenting today, as well as let us know of any deferrals?
Sure, I won't be able to show you pictures of them or anything like that, but we're going to have Jacob Lindsay, our department director, will be presenting some information today. Gianna Shaw Johnson, our director of housing and community development, will be presenting in a portion of the meeting. Chloe Stuber, who is a planner, is helping with us, helping us get all the items together. Philip Overcash is as well. Lee Batchelder, our zoning administrator, will be in for some questions and comments. And I believe that's everybody from staff. Oh, and then Marcy Grant is from our clerk's office, is keeping up with all our minutes and things like that.
Deferrals, anything else you need to let us know about?
Yes, sir. So under zonings, we have 2118 and 2120 St. James Drive and Riverland Terrace. That is an annexation that was going to go up for zoning. It's been withdrawn. And
That's item number 1 and 2?
That's number 4 under zonings.
Oh, sorry, yeah. 4 and
Okay.
5.
And then 1720 Pinecrest Road and Pinecrest Gardens, that zoning has been deferred.
Okay, great, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else you need to let us know, or we'll move on with the first item on the agenda?
Okay, and we'll just, if I can just run through these, the protocol here too as well, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, thank you.
Just a reminder to everyone attending here, just as in an in-person meeting, all items heard today are part of a public meeting format. For this introduction, staff will explain how public comments will be shared in the virtual setting. All zoning, rezoning, and ordinance amendment requests will receive a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and then we'll go on to City Council. All public hearings for the zoning, rezoning, and ordinance amendment items will be held at the August 19th City Council meeting. And then we've gone through, our folks are here. The virtual meeting protocol, staff will control the PowerPoint slides displayed throughout the meeting. These are what I'm rolling through right now. Applicant, staff, commissioners, and the public are required to give their name first whenever they speak. Video and microphones have been disabled for all attendees. The public will only be given the capability to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Applicants will be promoted from two panelists for the duration of their item, giving them temporary access to microphone and video. They remain muted unless called on to speak. Chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. Proceedings are being recorded. The commission members are seen on both video and heard when speaking. Commissioners are going to be polled by the chairman for their comments. When voting, they should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. So there we have it. And providing comment, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. Applicants and members of the public have been required to register to indicate the agenda item they wish to comment on and submit any documents by 12 noon today in order to speak public comment. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Individuals registered to speak will be called on in order for the applicable agenda item mentioned. Your microphone will be enabled when it's your turn to speak and disabled when you're done. You must state your name and address for the record. You may only speak once for each item. Unregistered individuals who raise their hand will not be called on to speak. Advanced registration is required. We also accepted written public comments till noon today, and we will be reading those today. So now we go on to the items. And Mr. Chairman, I'll just go ahead and announce this one if you want me to. This is rezoning number 1. It's Lock Haven Drive. It's off of the Glen McConnell Parkway in West Ashley. Yes.
Before the rezonings, did we still want to do city plan updates, which is before the rezonings?
Let's go ahead and move into the items, and then we'll do city plan updates a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Here with the rezoning, it's off of Glen McConnell Parkway. It's in West Ashley, of course. It's in an area that is adjacent to other multifamily complexes. I'm going to show a couple other images here. Here we have an image of this site with the star on it in the Century 5 plan. It's shown as a job center. However, the site is very compromised by wetlands, and there is a request for the rezoning, as it's stated on the initial screen here, to go from general office to business park. And business park allows for limited business type uses with appropriate screening. It does allow for things like cell towers, which is what is going to be requested for the site here. So it is in an area that, job center typically is more office buildings or industrial operations, things like that. But a cell tower kind of fits into that category too. It's not exactly, in any one particular category. I believe we have some aerial images here. Again, you can see this is a partially wooded track. It is impacted by utility lines already on it. This is a roadway leading in from the Glen McConnell Parkway that goes into some apartments. I believe those may be the Palms apartments there. There's also a funeral home across the street, and then some condominiums along Glen McConnell Parkway to the southeast here. And I think we have an image here. Again, you see the utility lines that cross over the site, and then there is a wooded area that provides some separation. And our recommendation is for approval for this business park rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant here to be heard?
Yes, I am promoting them to panelists right now.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Yates, are you here with us?
I'm gonna unmute Jonathan, see if that works.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Ah,
Yes, sir.
excellent, excellent. The miracles of modern technology. Chairman
Yes.
Carrick and members and fellow commissioners, Jonathan Yates. Good to be back with you. It's been a while. I wish we could be in person, but so be it in the times that we're in. First and foremost, I really want to thank Christopher Morgan and Philip Overcash and their team of helping to get us to this point today. We really appreciate it. Christopher has done a very good job of outlining the request. The request is to go from GO to BP. As you can see, I have a fairly interesting piece of property here. It's off of Lockhaven Drive, Egret Crest to the north. We're just in front of the Sable Palms apartments. We have the Colony condominiums and Heron Reserve over to the other side to the east, and right across the street from Stur's Funeral Home, a place I hope I don't go to personally anytime soon. But we have a 3-acre property. This is a property that the Whitfield Company has had since 1984. It was it came out of the 15,000 acres that Georgia Pacific had in that area, previously owned by Charleston Mining and Manufacturing. And quite simply, you start with 3 acres, you take out about 1.29 acres, which is the eastern portion of the property is wetland. You then go to the southern portion of the property, which is all a 170-foot power line easement, and it leaves you with about a half-acre usable property. What we propose here, which we've done in other environments, is a wireless communication infrastructure. When often as possible, we put our infrastructure next to existing infrastructure. In this case, you have power infrastructure. We would like to be placed next to it, infrastructure to infrastructure. The purpose of this infrastructure need is that in the area, as you all know, being on the City of Charleston Planning Commission, incredible growth for residential, commercial, and medical uses. What does that mean to us in the wireless community? More use of the network, overuse of the network. We are running into what we call capacity issues. We got more folks out there, whether they're living, working, or going to the hospital, than we can handle. So the purpose here is capacity. We saw this further exacerbated over the past spring with the COVID-19 quarantine. So we feel we found an excellent location. The rezoning from GO to BP will allow us to complete this process, then start a new process with Mr. Batchelder, who might be in the room somewhere. But I'm here for any and all questions. But as we see this is pretty much a half-acre property, as it's almost devoted entirely to infrastructure. We would like to add another infrastructure use to the property. That is our request. I'm here for any and all questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. I appreciate your time. Chloe, do we have anyone here that wants to, speak in favor of the application? Is anyone signed up to speak, or is there any comments in favor of the application?
No, no one has signed up to speak and no comments have been submitted.
Either for or against, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Yates, there's no comments, so if that's okay with you, we're going to close the public aspect of this.
That is okay. I would just want to reiterate that I'm very much for the request, Chairman Carrick.
No, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll close the public aspect of this, and I'd ask any commission members if they have any questions or comments or a motion.
Move for approval.
Ms. Lemphasis moves for approval. Is there a second or other comments?
I'll second that. This is Harry.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. There's a motion and a second. If no other comments, we'll go ahead and call for the vote on this. And I'll roll call the vote. Mr. Bailey?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Harrison? Ms. Harrison with us?
She's muted.
Okay.
I in favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
And Ms. Lampasas?
I in
Who
favor.
made the Okay, thanks. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
Thank you, and I'm in favor as well. So it looks like that's 8 in favor and none opposed. So thank you all. Item number 2 is Shepherd Street, PUD Peninsula TMS number 46004, 04, 074, 078, 080, and 086, approximately 1.386 acres. Request rezoning from general business, GB, limited business and accommodations overlay to PUD, Plan Unit Development, Shepherd Street. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. So this is a very small parcel. I'm hearing a little bit of a background thing or reverb or something. Has everybody got their volume muted?
I think it might be on, yeah. Is that better?
Okay, it's better. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a 1.38 acre parcel or a collection of parcels in the Upper King Street area. It is a request to create a PUD that would allow for mixed use development as well as accommodations uses, and swapping where some accommodations uses are here and actually reducing the scale of the accommodations uses. It's something that we've been working on with the applicants for a number of months now, and they've been doing a lot of due diligence on it. But I'll give you an orientation here. Upper King is here. If you can see my cursor, this is in a location that is just north of Spring Street area. It is near the King Street off-ramp that has been closed for a good bit of time for utility work for the drainage system. This is coming off the Septima Clark Parkway ramp coming down to Shepherd Street to King. To the north of this site is a location that we've created a good bit of affordable housing in with the Ingle Street development partnership with the city and the Charleston Housing Authority. And again, the main parts of King Street are to the south of this. We'll go to the next image. This is in our comprehensive plan, as the front portion towards King Street is in our urban core. The rear portion is our urban, so it is an area that's recommended for fairly intense development. Here you see an aerial of the property. What you also may not see in this, or don't see in this, but is going on, is an office building is already under construction on this front parcel facing King Street. It's a 4 or 5 story office building with ground floor retail. So it's really a mixed use building, and something we're very excited about to get some other diversity of uses on King Street. It's across the street from other office uses that are here in the area where the Highwire Distillery used to be, and the Daily kind of coffee shop and food retailer is. So it's an area of King Street that we're seeing more jobs locate in, which we're very pleased with. You also see on this aerial the shaft that is the upper northeastern end of the Spring Cannon drainage project that the city is working on, that will drain from this point further to the southwest, huge amounts of the crosstown and areas around it that will create much better drainage in the area. So this is an area that has been kind of closed off for a little while for that construction. I'm going to show some aerial images. The houses that are here, with 1 or 2 exceptions, have been used primarily for young 20-something student type rentals. 2 of these, I'm going to highlight this one, if you can see my cursor moving, and this one here on Shepherd Street are buildings that were kind of prefabricated buildings built in the 1990s. And then there are older historic structures here, one of which is not involved in this PUD, this property here. And then I believe we've got images of the western portion of the site, which has other historic properties on it that again were used for student rentals or were vacant. So this is an area that has not really been part of a neighborhood. It's been kind of orphaned here by virtue of the crosstown and the ramps and things like that. So it's a little bit of an unusual location. Here's some street views of these buildings. The one on the right here is one of these 1990s buildings that was prefabricated and brought to the site. And then you've got historic structures to the west. And here's some other images of the upper part of St. Philip Street. And oops, and there we go. So what the PUD would do is create a mixed use area up towards King where the office building would be and associated parking. The developers have also signed leases with the DOT for these areas in white up against the crosstown. That is DOT right of way. And they have signed leases for parking area in those, as well as parking that would be under the building and on some of the surface area here. They would expand upon that parking and move some buildings around to make for it. Then they would take the accommodations uses that are currently allowed in the area along King Street, because it's currently part of the accommodations overlay, and move that to the rear portion to this accommodations or residential area of almost 1/3 of an acre, and take the 50 units that they could have built into the structure up here on King Street and convert them to about 30 accommodations units in the houses that would be to the rear over here. And there's some other images within here, but we have, as I said, have been working with the applicant on this and are very much in favor of this. There may be some relocations of some structures involved, which may lead to some affordable housing opportunities. Ms. Johnson may want to speak a little bit to that, but it's a PUD that, you know, is helping us further our mixture of uses on King Street with a good employment center and office building. And then it's also reducing the accommodations impact in the area. Meanwhile, it is getting some structures that were in pretty tough shape renovated and made into attractive residential looking structures, even if they're used for accommodations uses. So this is why staff has been supportive of this and recommend its approval.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. You said another staff member wanted to speak on this? You said Ms. Johnson or someone?
Ms. Johnson may be available at this time if she wanted to speak on this. Chloe, is Ms. Johnson nearby?
She is nearby, and I've just promoted her to panelist if she wants to speak.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for the opportunity to share with you information relative to this particular development. My office has been working closely with the development team and the owners of this property, along with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, who is one of the nonprofits in our community that has as one of its programs a community land trust. That land trust enables properties once redeveloped or constructed new to remain affordable for 99 years. And so we are working very closely with this team to determine if at least 3 of these structures can be renovated for the purposes of providing both affordable and attainable housing in our community. When you look at the structures from the outside, they do look pretty rough, but when you go in, the homes have been well maintained. So that's exciting to us that this opportunity exists. We are contemplating having to move at least 2 of the properties or 2 of the structures, and are working again with the owners of the site as well as SCDOT on a property that they own that is in very close proximity here, such that the move would not be more than 2 miles. So we're working toward that goal, and we do support the effort, and certainly anytime we secure affordable and attainable for long-term and greater affordability or greater affordable product in our community, we want to do that. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for your work on behalf of the city as well. Is the applicant
Mr.
here?
Chairman, we have Ms. Jacobs has raised her hand.
Ms. Jacobs, you had a question?
Not at this time. I went ahead and raised my hand when it was appropriate for me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just add in reference to Ms. Johnson's comments. So the site that we are looking at for potentially relocating a couple of the houses would be over here at Cumming and Fishburne, which is also on your agenda tonight for a zoning. So just so everybody understands the relationship of that site to this planned unit development. And it's literally across the crosstown. It's within a couple hundred feet.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Chloe, do we have the Mr. Wilson or Mr. Bello? I see they'll be presenting tonight.
Yes, they both should be able to unmute and share their video if they'd like to speak at this time.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Chairman, this is James Wilson, if you can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. With me is Mr. Bello of Bello Garris Architects, of course, and also Mike Johnson of Forsberg Engineering, and we're here on behalf of the applicants, the principals of which are Mitch and Taylor Norville. As usual, Mr. Morgan did an excellent job describing what is in this PUD. We've been working with the planning department for a good 6 months or so on this, and we think we've come up with a pretty good approach to it. I just want to hit a couple of highlights quickly. The property is, as you see, is sort of an island in the middle of the Septima Clark Parkway with the ramps going up to I-26 on either side, and the new city drainage shaft at the western end of the property. It's not really connected to the neighborhoods to north or south. The only pedestrian access is from King Street. And so based on the history of it and kind of how it's situated, it's not really ideal for families, and the houses have been empty for a couple of years. And as Mr. Morgan said, it was previously had student apartments was a big part of the use. And a number of these historic structures are in need of major renovation, particularly 94 is in a really dilapidated condition. So the PUD that we're proposing does a couple of things. The property is more or less all zoned general business right now. One small piece of it is limited business, and then the front parcel is zoned within the accommodations overlay. The PUD basically keeps the same permitted uses as currently allowed in the general business GB district, but as Mr. Morgan described, it basically moves the accommodations use from King Street back to what I think of as kind of the rear of the property, which is the westernmost piece that you see in green there. We're reducing the total allowed number of accommodations units from right now, you could have 50. We're reducing that down to a maximum of 30 accommodations units and shrinking the size of the piece that has an allowed accommodations use. As Mr. Morgan described, we're essentially taking a hotel site off of King Street and putting kind of allowing a smaller accommodations unit back on that back piece. As you see on the screen there, with the green and the purple, they're really sort of two areas of this. There's the smaller accommodations area in green, which has a majority of historic structures on it to be renovated. And then the front piece is the larger mixed use area with the office building that's getting underway and surface parking as well. The surface parking area that could have future development at some point, in addition to parking, that's part of the PUD, but there are no plans right now at this time for any development on that. We're just sort of looking at it as what might happen there in the future. A PUD requires that you set the maximum residential density. That's one of the things that has to go in, and so we've done that with a maximum of 46 dwelling units on the larger area and a maximum of 11 units on the smaller area. And we've set a parking at 1 space per dwelling unit. A couple things to note that we are not changing. This does not change height districts at all. Right now, the front piece on King is zoned for 5 stories. The rest of the property is zoned 2.5 stories. That does not change. And then, of course, BAR has jurisdiction over any historic structures on the property. And so any alterations to those would require BAR approval. We have, in addition to working with the planning staff and with Ms. Johnson, who just spoke, we've been through the TRC process for a PUD as is normal, and then we've met with virtually met with, I should say, Historic Charleston Foundation, the Preservation Society, and have talked at length with the president of the Cannon-Borough-Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association, even though technically this property is not in the Cannon-Borough-Elliott Borough neighborhood. That's the closest neighborhood, so to speak. And generally, obviously, there's a lot of support for restoring and improving Shepherd Street. None of us have had access to it for a while, but everyone will remember that when you come down off of 26 there on the ramp, you can exit to the right to get around to King Street, or you can actually exit here to the left around where the drainage shaft is nearing completion and onto Shepherd Street. So this is, in a sense, sort of one of our entrances to the city. And so improving this area, we feel like, is a valuable thing all around. With regard to the affordable housing piece, really, I think, the planning staff gets a lot of credit for this. This really emerged just out of our conversations where we've got a couple of these non-historic buildings that really were slated for demolition, essentially, and thought about, well, hey, what can we do with these? And looked around. And I think Mr. Morgan and Mr. Lindsay had a good thought and said, well, let's bring in Ms. Johnson and look at what we can do, and identified that property that DOT owns just across the street at the southeast corner of Cumming and Fishburne. And we had already been in touch with DOT about doing some parking, and so we went back to them, and DOT has responded favorably that they're inclined to give that property to the city, so then it could pass on to the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation or the Land Trust. And then we're proposing is that we then donate the non-historic homes to move over to that site and let the CRC run those as affordable housing. So that's not technically within the PUD here, but it's part of what's really grown out of this. And we feel like we're on a great path there, and looks like it's coming together. That'll come up, as Mr. Morgan mentioned, later on as an agenda item, but we've had really good process working with the whole city team on that. So just in conclusion, I'd say this is a small, but we think impactful project with a number of benefits, including the restoration of historic structures. We're adding some new office space right on King Street. We're reducing the permitted accommodations units from 50 down to 30. And hopefully out of this also creating some new affordable housing. So we think there's a lot of good things going on here. I'll stop at that, but obviously would be glad to answer any questions that anyone has. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, does anyone else want to speak? I mean, we're glad to hear from anyone else on your team, but...
I think we're probably good, but we've got Eddie and Mike available if there's a question they can help answer.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate your work. This is a unique piece of property, and with the concerns over accommodations, looks like y'all have come up with a good plan, so I appreciate your work on this. I think, Chloe, we have, it looks like there's maybe one written comment. Has anyone signed up to speak, or maybe there's one written comment we need to read in the record?
Yes, we have Ms. Erin Minnigan signed up to speak.
Okay.
So I'm going to enable her microphone. Okay. Okay.
Hey, can you hear me?
Erin, yes, we can.
Great. Thank you. Erin Minnigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for meeting with us and walking us through this PUD request. As Mr. Wilson covered, there are some clear positives to this proposal, including the retention of office space, reduction in potential accommodations units, investment in renovation of historic buildings, and of course, the prospect to create affordable housing, all of which will bring value and activation to this challenged site. However, we feel there is too much vagueness and flexibility in the current proposal to meet the intent of the ordinance for a PUD rezoning. Specifically, the conceptual land use plan provides no detail on approximate locations of buildings, open space, or parking, and leaves questions as to how the abandoned St. Philip Street right-of-way may be utilized or how existing buildings may be rearranged to accommodate the program. This is an exciting opportunity for the entire site to come under single ownership, but there are still major questions as to how that opportunity will be capitalized, what this development is intended to become. We urge the applicant to go further and frame and master plan for this PUD and return to the Planning Commission with a more complete proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chloe, is there anyone else? I know I saw one, looks like there was one written comment. Anyone else signed up to speak?
No one else has signed up to speak. Erin, did you also want your comment read into the record?
No, thank you. It's the same as I just spoke into the record.
Okay.
That's great. Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Wilson, since there's no one else signed up to speak, Mr. Wilson, would you like to reply to the comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really briefly, I would say we absolutely understand the Preservation Society's request. That they want to know what else might go on the site. The accommodations piece at the rear that already has four historic buildings on it that will need to be renovated but they're going to remain just where they are as things stand. And of course, there's an office building that's already gone through TRC and has a building permit for the front piece. And then the middle section is basically parking. There is no current plan or any design or site plan or elevations to do anything in the middle section of it. So we don't really have anything that we can present on that. Obviously anything that's going to go up there will have to go through the regular city process with BAR and TRC. And there is a process for that. This is just the zoning for the property, not not an architectural plan or something more than that. So we do believe that we've got the right elements here for the PUD, and that and we certainly appreciate the Preservation Society's point that they will want to know what else could go here eventually. We do believe that process for that, but that's a later process when you go to put up buildings or do anything else there. So and we of course will gladly we'll be participating in that when the time comes, if there is future additional development on the site. So glad to answer any more, but hopefully that's helpful.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. That's going to close the public aspect of this. We'll now ask commission members. Ms. Jacobs, did you have a question? I knew you had your hand up earlier.
No, I didn't have a specific question. I just have, well, they are specific questions and conversation before we make any sort of motion for approval or disapproval. If I could, I don't want to make a motion at this time. I would just like to discuss what I found to be concerning and positive at the same time. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Okay, thank you. I remember this property because I believe we rezoned those, some of those houses from residential into general business to be considered for short-term rentals. Is that correct, Christopher? I just want to make sure my memory is correct.
No, ma'am, because they are not in the short-term rental overlay, so they're not eligible for that. So
no, but we did rezone those houses from residential into GB.
And we would have to check on that, but they are definitely not in the short-term rental overlay because that is outside. outside of the Cannonboro Elliott Grove short-term rental.
Yeah, I know. I remember they were outside of that, but I remember them, we did that. I remember the applicant coming forward for that.
There was an applicant who asked to have the short-term rental overlay moved over this area, which the staff felt was not a very good request. And I believe that ended up being deferred, or actually, I think it was turned down. I think it ended up being turned down by council because there was a lot of
Okay, it might have been council that turned it down because I think we approved that. But anyway, it's just trying to get my head around the situation. I was actually kind of excited to see this PUD because that is kind of an awkward space right there. And I know that original owner was looking to try to help somehow with his particular problem there. I do have a few questions or maybe considerations that we might want to have them look a little further on. I was a little surprised that there was such a lack of consideration for green space or open space in the way I read the PUD. And I found there to be some kind of irony with the sense that that drainage system is sitting with a big hole right in front of the property. I just feel like when we look at some layouts of properties, we ought to have at least some terms in those about looking at open space, green space, low impact development within these things. I'd like to see us consider that. I did find some of the language a little iffy, like the Preservation Society did, but I understood the applicant's response for that. Still have a little concern about it. With regard to their extensive parking that's there, I don't know if it's appropriate to put language in a PUD that really has, once again, these low impact development kind of pervious surfaces, since we're sitting surrounded by concrete there with highways that we really need to be considerate of. And I was pleased to hear that they were in discussions about affordable housing, because that was my other big concern about this, that there was no mention of that in any form here, that there would be any affordable housing. I do appreciate that they would like to share these homes and move them to the other property as far for affordable housing. But if we're going to allow for the maximum consideration on both of the residential part and the general business part for density, we might want to say if you go to maximum, there should be more affordable housing allowed. If they go less, then they've already done their due diligence with what they've offered. But if they're going to go to maximum build out, we should have some kind of consideration in that maximum build out that we would get a little bit more affordable housing. I'm not really sure quite how to handle this if I make a motion with specific recommendations, but I didn't want to do that till we had a chance to speak with it with the commission. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Other comments, questions of commission members? Anybody else? If not, Chloe, is anyone else? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody.
No one has raised their hand. Oh, we have Mr. Lassane raising his hand now.
Yeah, Mr. Lassane?
Yeah, Charlie, I was just going to see if Mr. Wilson wouldn't mind addressing the questions from Ms. Jacobs.
Mr. Wilson, can we, Chloe, can we get Mr. Wilson on to answer those questions?
Yes, please. Thank you. This is James. So with regard to open space, the way our statute and ordinance works is that if you are a small site like this, which is an acre, in total an acre and a little change and some change, there's not technically an open space requirement. This is under our comprehensive plan, this is an urban and urban core site. And so, as currently it exists, it doesn't really have like a big green space. You see some trees in there, particularly in the DOT right of way. But we talked with the city staff about that, and it was a point even that we talked about with the mayor a little bit. And obviously, if there are little nooks and places where we can have green area in here, we'll do that. but we really don't have a lot of land to sort of create a dedicated new park or something like that. With regard to the affordable housing, we are not asking for like incentive zoning, like an MU1 or MU2 WH, zoning where you have unlimited density as long as you provide a percentage of workforce housing or a payment in lieu thereof. So we're basically trying to stick with the urban density model, and we were trying to ask for what's a normal amount here, not to go ask for something extraordinary. So we do believe we are sticking with the kind of the norm for an urban site like this. Obviously, we want to make the affordable housing work, and we are absolutely committed to donating those two buildings. Each of those buildings, by the way, has 2 units, a downstairs unit apartment and an upstairs apartment. Each is 3 bedrooms. So if we're able to put both of those buildings over on the site across the street, which we're very optimistic that we are, given DOT's positive response, that would be 4 3-bedroom affordable housing units that would be created over there. So we do feel like that's a pretty substantial addition to the city's affordable housing stock, and we're obviously committed to doing that. I think that's probably all I can say to those points, but glad to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Ms. Jacobs and Mr. Lassane, any other questions of Mr. Wilson before we let him? Ms. Jacobs?
No, I still have my concerns about that, but thank you for the response.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other questions, comments, motions of commission members? Go ahead, Ms. Jacobs, you had something?
I was going to say, I'd be willing to make a motion with some considerations to council, because they'll have to go to council for their approval so that they can at least review our considerations if that's appropriate. So I would make a motion to approve the PUD with some discussion with council for a little bit better consideration of some small green spaces or additional trees help offset drainage. And that if we're going to put in the PUD that they have the maximum density for the zonings, that if they build to the maximum, there needs to be a better calculation for affordable housing at that maximum build out. And council can refine those details with their discussions.
Let me just make sure we're getting this right. So you're making a motion to approve. Tell me, with council to consider, rephrase that again, if you would, please.
For council to consider the green open space component of this, because even though it's not in the zoning, we're currently now asking to sort of write a zoning contract with these people using the base zoning. That doesn't mean we can't ask for highest and best considerations as we move forward. So I would like to ask for some consideration of green space, to be creative about that. And if we allow the maximum density for both of the zonings to be built out, there has to be a calculation to increase the affordable housing with that zoning.
Mr. Morgan, again, I don't know that we have the ability to approve it. I know if Ms. Jacobs made a motion to approve, it would go to council. That word consideration, Mr. Lassane, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if that word consideration, if they say we're approving, it came from planning to committed with consideration. There's not really a lot of binding in the word consideration, I don't think. If they can consider, we can recommend they consider, I guess. But
I'd like to recommend they consider, because we did that with the PUD for the Epic Center, that we approved it with certain things that we wanted council to consider and recommend for them to approve.
Mr. Lassane, Mr. Morgan, did you?
If you were asking me a question, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to respond that, we can certainly inform council members of comments from planning commission on this if they aren't actual outright conditions. One thing I would caution against is that this site has to go through extensive stormwater review. It's quite possible that through that extensive stormwater review, that other pervious areas or green space areas or things like that could be required, because there are much higher standards for stormwater now than there ever were when any of this stuff was built before. And I know that in conceptual discussion, the applicants are working on a concept where the accommodations uses are clustered together with an open kind of courtyard area that's a nice green space, things like that. But I think because they don't know yet where they're going to have to go with the stormwater, because the stormwater is going to be such a huge undertaking here, they didn't want to commit to certain layouts. Mr. Wilson can probably explain that further, but there are definite stormwater concerns here that mean that advanced level of planning is going to be very difficult at this point.
Chris, if I could, this is Chloe.
Yes, ma'am.
And Charlie, you said that can't hear the echo. Christopher, we have some of the folks who signed up to speak and who submitted comment for zoning. The final zoning that you mentioned earlier is connected with the site, that are wanting to speak now. And I know that this is not the same item, but because they are connected, I was wondering if you could just sort of speak to those residents about how this is separate and how they will have their turn to speak, and that the plans that have been voiced regarding the affordable housing, moving the housing and renovating the existing housing, what will be done if that zoning is not ultimately approved.
Chloe, you were asking me to speak to that?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, to those folks who are interested in the zoning issue at Cumming and Fishburne Street, that is a completely separate issue. If that zoning is not approved at Cumming and Fishburne, then there may be no change at all to the property at Cumming and Fishburne. But that is a separate issue. There is an idea to move a couple of the houses from this PUD area to the Cumming and Fishburne location. However, it depends on the zoning at Cumming and Fishburne, which is a separate item. I hope that clarifies, and we will certainly hear out your concerns that you might have at the time we discuss the Cumming and Fishburne application item.
I agree with you, Chris. That's a separate item, and those probably should be heard then. Any other, Ms. Jacobs had made a motion. Was there a second to the motion? Was there a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Lampus seconds the motion. And is any more discussion or questions before we vote on the motion made by Ms. Jacobs and seconded by Ms. Lampus? If not, we'll go ahead and go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Before I vote, I noticed a couple hands were raised.
Oh, good. I didn't see. I'm sorry. Who wanted to speak? I'm sorry.
Mr. Sampson.
Mr. Lassane, is that?
I can start if you can hear me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I would just like you to restate the motion before we vote. Can you do that?
Say that I can, or can staff, I don't know if somebody wrote it down very clearly and concisely. I know there was a motion
put what my
favor of the
if Ms. Jacobs could amend any errors that I have, but I had that it was a recommendation for approval with council being informed that Planning Commission would like them to consider the potential inclusion of more green space, impervious paving, innovative kind of stormwater techniques, and potentially more emphasis on affordable housing. Ms. Jacobs, is that paraphrasing what your motion was?
That's a perfect concise bullet. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, Christopher. Other commission members have questions? Ms. Johnson, does that answer your question? Great, thank you. Any other questions of commission members? Would anybody else want to speak? Chloe, am I missing anybody? You
Mr.
tell me now.
Lassane and Mr. Bailey.
Mr. Lassane?
My question was answered, Charlie. So Jimmy.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Bailey, you go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted. No, I'll support Donna's motion as long as it's clear that this is just a recommendation that the council consider these things. It's not a condition. I think that I'm hearing my feedback now. I think that there is a lot of positive about this application. Getting the hotel use out of the question, I think is very important, the office space use. And while I appreciate some of the things that were in the Preservation Society letter, I thought Mr. Wilson was persuasive in pointing out that there will be future opportunities for the public to engage on this.
Right, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Anyone else? Chloe, want to speak?
Enter your participant ID.
If not, we'll go back to the
Charlie,
motion.
Mr. Lassane.
Go ahead, Mr. Lassane.
Sorry to keep raising him, but I just wanted to echo what Mr. Bailey said. I think there's so many positive things about this PUD. I think it addresses this sort of missing tooth on Upper King Street, and it gives us an opportunity to create some affordable housing if everything goes like we'd like to see it go. And I think that the process that the developer will go through with the city will produce the kinds of outcomes that Ms. Jacobs mentioned, particularly in terms of stormwater, which the stormwater regulations will probably most likely create some additional green space as the project goes through the process. So, you know, I feel good about the city process producing the kind of outcome that we're all looking for. So I am supportive of it, and I would echo Mr. Bailey's comments that these are just recommendations and not conditions.
Right, and I'm going to agree with both Mr. Bailey and Mr. Lassane. I think this is, as we said earlier, a unique piece of property, and the accommodations coming off the table is a very big positive, and the affordable housing is a positive as well. And as Mr. Lassane said, and Mr. Morgan said, the city's going to scrutinize this property like they are everything to make sure it's done right. So, is any other comments? If not, we'll go back to the vote. The motion was made by Ms. Jacobs and seconded by Ms. Lempersis. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lempersis?
I in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So that's, I think, 8 in favor of Ms. Jacobs's motion. So thank you all. Item number 3 on the agenda is Laurel Island Peninsula, TMS number 464000000. I think I got enough zeros. Maybe another one, 6, 002, 023, 038, 459, 02, 0013, and 4611, 303, 0224, approximately 196.1 acres, request rezoning from general business, GB, heavy industrial, Upper Peninsula, and diverse residential to PUD, Laurel Island. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, so this property has a strong, long history here over the last 15 years or so, and the applicants are going to be talking a little bit about that. But let's just orient you all to the site. First off, this is Morrison Drive, running roughly north-south in the Upper Peninsula area. The Cooper River Bridge is down here to the south and its associated ramps. The Laurel Island is the former landfill that is in this location here that's zoned heavy industrial. It also incorporates the current Charleston County Recycling Center, which is right here at the end of Romney Street. Of course, that recycling center will be moving out. I'm not sure the exact time frame. I think the applicants can explain it, but the county is building a state-of-the-art recycling center off Palmetto Commerce Parkway in North Charleston. So they will have much better capacity up there than they do at Romney Street. It also includes a former MUSC bus repair depot here on Romney, and then Charleston County's Development Disabilities Board site, as well as I believe there's a small courtroom and other surface parking in this location here. So it's a number of things in the Upper Peninsula that would be redeveloped via this PUD. Of course, the existing heavy industrial zoning allows a good bit of residential on it at present. So it's important for everybody to understand that. The heavy industrial allows 19.4 units an acre. So you would get thousands of units with that, even without a PUD. And of course, you know, this PUD will give us a much better, as we will show, we think, a much better urban area for the city. But it's important to understand that there is a lot of development entitlement on the site. Of course, the GB that is Charleston County is 26.4 units an acre. So a good bit of units that could go on that under current zoning. So it's definitely an area that could already have a lot of things, and the planned unit development, we feel like, makes for a better layout of the overall project. I will go through a few other slides here with the applicant. I believe the applicant was going to start in on this, Chloe, at this point.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had to.
Okay, is this time for me to talk now?
Is here. Yes.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good to virtually see y'all. I'm Eddie Bello with Bello Garris Architects, and also online with our team is Robert Clement with Clement Development, Brian Hellman with Hellman, Yates, and Tisdale, Rhett Reidenbach and Jenny Cavucci with Revere Group, and Cole Northcutt representing the owner with Core Properties. And so I've got a lot of information. I'm going to try not to take too long because I know you've got other things on the agenda, but it is a significant piece of property, and we've done a lot of work, and I just I want to go through that with you. So Christopher, next slide.
It's not advancing for me. Hold on one second. There we go. That's the second slide, Eddie?
Yeah, that's it. That's good. Okay, so a little bit about the history. This property has never had much development on it at all. In the early 1800s, some structures designed by Robert Mills, our most famous architect, were built out there, some powder magazines. And then in the 1910 era, some structures, utilitarian structures, were built for Standard Oil. Those are that pier and those brick buildings that you see out on the river there. The Robert Mills structures were eventually torn down for a long time. Starting in the 1940s, it was used for spoil area for dredging. And then in the 1960s, it was used as a landfill. And that landfill use continued up until mid-1995. And then in 2003, the current owner bought the property. Next slide.
I'm having some issues getting my slide advancer to advance. Let's see. I may just go the old fashioned way. Let's see. There we go.
Okay, so as Christopher said, there's been a good bit of planning, various developments over the last 12 years, and I won't go through all of those, but the most recent one was the Laurel development. And I wasn't part of that team, but several members of our current team were involved with that. And I think the key takeaway from that development process was that there was a significant amount of public engagement. There were a lot of charrettes, public meetings. I personally went to several just as an interested Charlestonian. And the project, the development didn't end up occurring. It was mostly focused on being a retail destination, which wasn't really right, I don't think, but there was a lot of good public information that came out of that. And it wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago. And a lot of that public input is what has driven our plan. And then, so here we are, last year in 2019, a TIF was developed. And then, of course, we're asking for now approval of the PUD. Next slide. This was a slide done by an engineer. This is just an example of what the soil conditions are out there. And I don't need to go into this too much, and I really can't talk about it nearly as well as the engineers can, but the takeaway is it's very difficult to build on, as you can imagine, on top of a landfill that's over dredge spoil, that's over marsh. And so that means that our utilities, all of our infrastructure has to be very well engineered. The good thing is we are at elevation 20, which is very tall for Charleston, which means we're out of the flood zone. And as an architect, that's really good news because I don't have to flood proof and do all those types of things. And it really opens up a lot more good opportunities for better architecture. We can talk more about the soils later if needed. Next slide. Okay, so one of the first things that we did, and again, a lot of this was driven from public input, and I think just from kind of common sense, was we wanted to develop some guiding principles as we laid out the plan. And so we have 5 of those. I'll go through those quickly. Next slide, Christopher. Yeah. The first one is connection to the environment.
There we go.
And we want to make sure the plan has these things listed here. Strong connection to the water, view corridors, strong pedestrian and bike paths, and then of course as many public parks and plazas and other open spaces as we can work in. Next slide. The next one, I think any responsible development in this time should include sustainable and resilient practices. I already touched on a little bit of that with the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is going to be designed to accommodate long-term climate change, and of course will be engineered well above typical practices. We have a lot of things in the PUD that emphasize public transportation access points. We will encourage sustainable practices in the buildings themselves. And then just in general, I think it's good to remember this is where development should be. This is on a former landfill site in the heart of our city. It's not a site well outside, inducing sprawl. This is where development should be. So that itself is a good sustainable practice. Next slide. Social and economic diversity are certainly important. One of the key components of this plan is that we are going to have 10% affordable housing that will be in forever. And it won't be something that's added towards the end. Any multifamily that comes in, 10% has to be built in. And so that's very important. We're very proud to keep that in. Also, I mentioned the Laurel plan, and that was basically just a shopping destination. And this is not that at all. It's a diverse mix of uses with commercial office, multifamily, retail, and an entertainment district. And then our goal is that it be just like the rest of the peninsula with a mix of race, income, and age. And we think because of those other elements I just mentioned, we'll have that. Next slide. Of course, any planner will tell you what's most important when you're laying out a large scale development like this is the quality of the public realm. We have a wonderful public realm here in Charleston, and certainly we can be inspired by Charleston itself. So the plan is organized around the public experience. Public parks are integral. And then again, the building design itself will be designed to activate the public realm. And then the last guiding principle, Christopher, is authenticity. You know, we have the real thing here in Charleston. So we want to be inspired by Charleston's defining elements. You know, the plan should be organized around a rational street grid that responds to the context. And then those historic sites that I mentioned should be preserved and celebrated. Okay, so next slide. So that's that. Next slide. Sorry, Christopher.
In sluggish. There we go. Okay.
Okay. So thinking about how we would lay out the streets, we look to the peninsula itself. And I've always liked this map on the right. That's from 1877. And if you look at the lower peninsula, and I think everybody knows the peninsula grew from the south to the north, the street grid is organized mostly around sort of a response to the water. And then at some point, I don't know why, but at some point, that's Buffane Street, the grid shifts to more of a north and south. And of course, there's all kind of quirks and other areas, but you know, I think we took that as inspiration for how to maybe lay out our grid. Next slide. Okay, so when we look at our island, some factors to consider. Next, Christopher. A few key things that are important. You know, I mentioned the Standard Oil ruins. Those are up there at the northeast, the top right there. And then the Robert Mills ruins, which are there sort of to the middle of the left. And then, so we want to make sure we focus on those as we lay out the plan. And then of course, Magnolia Cemetery at the northwest, you know, that's on the National Register of Historic Places. So we want to be very sensitive to the views from that cemetery. And then I think everybody understands that as you approach this site from the Ravenel Bridge, the views from the bridge are going to be very important. So, you know, how that's handled is critical. Next slide. Okay, so one of the first things we did, we looked at the grid in that part of the town. That's East Central neighborhood. Whoops. That's all right, just leave it. So we took that grid and we pulled it over to our new plan. And so a couple things to pick up here is, it's kind of hard, I can't point, but one of the streets, that's Romney Street. That's sort of our main street. One of the goals with this plan, even though it's an island, we want to somehow connect it as best we can to the rest of the city. And one simple way is to try and pull some of the grid over there. So that top street, that's Romney that connects. That's sort of our main street. And then the lower one that connects, thanks, Christopher, that will be the new bridge that connects at Cool Bluff. And then you see, we sort of then, not unlike the peninsula, we were kind of inspired. We had more of a north-south grid that worked better with how the layout of the island is. All right, next slide. Thanks for putting up with all these crazy slides. All right, next one, Christopher.
Sorry, this is just going slow here.
It's okay. I made it more complicated for you. Okay, so a couple things for this that this grid allowed us to do is, I don't know if you can see it, but what it does is it sets up view corridors to the river from all of the major streets. And then if you click the next one, Christopher, just about all of the secondary streets as well. So that's a huge thing. You know, there's an, I don't know if it's an ordinance, but it seems like there's a rule with the city. You cannot block any view corridor from our streets to the harbor. Same thing here. So pretty much wherever you are on this island in this development, you'll see the water. You'll have a connection to the environment. So that's a big thing to us. Next one, Christopher. And again, all these tie into those guiding principles that I talked about before, which a lot of them were driven by what we heard from the public back a few years ago. All right, so next, click here. Let's see. All right, so a couple of things to point out on the plan. Hopefully this will work.
Connection to the environment.
Yeah, I already did that. So next one, click. Sorry, it's okay.
It's
yes. All right, so a couple things. So we've got, it works so smoothly on my computer. All right, so at the top, sort of right there, the northeast, we've set up a park at the point right there on axis with those ruins. Click again, Christopher. At the west side there, we've got an interpretive trail. Again, another big park that would go around the Robert Mills ruins. Click again. Yeah, thank you.
Do we get to advance? There we go.
We're going to have on axis again, that Romney is our main sort of street coming in. And so we're going to have a public dock there with potentially ferry access. I see that as being kind of to the scale as the as Waterfront Park, you know, large pier. Next one, Christopher. At the south, that's more of a creek right there. So we would have, again, another park, another public point for accessing the water. Those would be crabbing docks, much more low scale, more low country. Next one, Christopher. We've set aside there to the northwest areas for ball fields. And also remember what I was saying earlier about Magnolia Cemetery. It's right just off of that. So that is one way to make sure there's no buildings right there to sort of protect that view. Next slide. And then one of the key elements of this PUD is Singleton Park. It doesn't seem like it would be, but you know, that's owned by Dominion and they could put a substation there. And what we are doing as part of this plan is providing some of their Dominion substations on our property as part of the PUD. So that will ensure that Singleton Park stays a park for that neighborhood. So that's, even though it's off the island, that's part of this overall plan. So it's another sort of park. And then last, we have this pedestrian path that encircles the entire island, which is almost 2 miles, I think. So that is an incredible amenity, and you know, everyone can use that. So that's again, one more thing that sort of ties our guiding principles into the plan. Okay, next slide, please. And I think those were the trickiest slides, Christopher. So next slide. So that's the plan, how it lays out. A couple things about the height district, like Christopher said, you know, this is heavy industrial. It's currently zone W, which is this very strange height district. I don't know why it is the way it is, but it basically allows very, very tall buildings. If you're 500 feet from your property line, you can have a 500-foot tall building, and it has all these other weird conditions. But that would be going away. The small triangle there is the Upper Peninsula District. That allows 12 stories. And then the county's property there is the tech corridor overlay. It's actually 85 feet, but that allows, you can get 7 stories there. So we're changing it to, click please. We've got 4 height districts. The yellow there is our entertainment district. That's 2 stories. I didn't really talk about that area that much, but that is a great opportunity for another public amenity. It's not technically a park, but that could be a place where the public can go. And I don't know exactly what will happen there, but that's set aside as entertainment. And that would be very low scale. The sort of bluish color is a 2.5 to 3.5 story district. And those are at the top there and then at the farthest south. And then the purple is 8 story and red is 12 story. And so what we've done is not unlike how the peninsula is laid out with our zoning. We've concentrated all of the height right around the center and let the lower heights be at the edges. So that protects the views coming into the city, it protects the views while you're on the island, and it puts the density where we think will make a better public space. Next slide. And so one thing too, I think it's important to point out, you see a lot of green there. So we've concentrated all the heights and everything in the center. And so what that's allowed us to do is have a lot of open space. And so PUD, the city's PUD requirements require 20% of the overall property to be open space. And of that land, of that open space, 25% needs to be usable. That's just the base requirement for PUDs. We're providing twice the open space and 4 times the usable open space. Now, we don't have the final figures because we've got engineering to do and it's going to shift around a little bit, but it's not going to go down or up that much. But that's again, a big deal, I think, a big success of the plan. Next slide. All right, I promise I'll speed up now. We just have a few things. We've got 4 different street types. And again, I talked about the main street is this Boulevard Street coming in. It's off of Romney. Next slide. And I won't get too much into all these, but I think a couple of key takeaways are all the streets have parallel parking on both sides in 1 lane. This street has a bike lane, but it has a protected bike lane. You see there a 3-foot planting strip. And you don't see that a lot, definitely not in the South where we are, but you see it a lot in Europe. And what that does is it emphasizes the importance of cycling as a true means of transportation, of commuter transportation, not just riding around for fun. And so we think that's very important. So that's our main street. Next slide. The primary streets, click Christopher, are just the same except for without that median. Again, there's a little bit of a pretty significant right of way. It's not huge, but these could be tall buildings. So we want to make sure these don't feel like canyons. We've got wide sidewalks to encourage outdoor dining and other uses like that. Next slide. And then the secondary streets. Next slide, Christopher. Again, very straightforward. Parallel parking both sides, travel lanes, and then sidewalks. And then the last street are the neighborhood, next slide, Christopher, which it's a 50-foot right of way, which is pretty much what you find in most of downtown other than the large streets. This is what you find in East Central. It's what you find in Wagner Terrace. It's where I'm sitting now in Canterbury, LA Borough. So that's very, what a Charleston street normally is. Okay, so those are the streets. And again, we will eventually, those are the main streets. These are the bones of it. As this develops, there may be smaller Burns Lane type alleys that are worked in there. But for now, but those should be allowed to grow kind of organically. The goal here is to just get the bones right. And before I leave this page, one thing that's important to note, if you look at the streets, all of the streets are outboard of the development, just like think of Murray Boulevard downtown. So in just about everywhere on this island, the public will have access to the water just by being in a car or walking along the street. You won't look across the street and have a building blocking your view. So that's a really big deal. All right, so 2 more things to go over. Next slide. Our next step is to develop architectural design principles for the island, and these will guide how development will occur, and it'll cover architectural design, building placement, landscape signage, and lighting design. And then we will present those principles. That'll be a public process. We'll again meet with all the advocacy groups and neighborhoods, and we'll present that to the BAR large for their comment and review and approval. So that's coming later. We need to get the PUD approved first. And then next, Christopher, last slide. Is we're set, the PUD establishes a Laurel Island Architectural Review Board. And that will basically review projects based on those design principles that I just talked about. Those will be public meetings and advertised just like the BAR. And they'll be comprised of 2 members of Laurel Island Communities Group, and then 1 member that'll be appointed by the City of Charleston Planning Department. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much. We're very excited about it. And again, we appreciate your time. We know this is not for a vote, but we want to make sure we get as many comments as we can. The purpose of this was to hear the commission's comments and to hear any other comments that we can get from the public. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. Chris, did you want to finish up your part of your presentation and recommendation?
Well, we were not making recommendations at this time. We've of course been working with the applicants on this. They're very much in favor of the concepts that they're showing, but we haven't gotten all our final detailed recommendations on it. I think we're very interested in hearing thoughts and comments from the commission in reference to what Mr. Bello presented. So yeah, I think there are some other.
Yes.
Okay.
Some people signed up, I think, to speak, I believe.
Yes. So Christopher, if you could first, we have no one has signed up to. We have a few folks who have submitted signed up to speak for just general comment. They didn't specify opposed or in favor. But first, we have 2 people who've submitted comments in opposition. If Christopher could read those into the record. And also, we got a late email from LaTanya Gamble with Eastside Community Development Corporation. She's also in opposition. Just wanted to state that for the record and relay those comments. But Christopher, if you could please read the written comments in opposition first. There should be 2.
Yes.
And Christopher, I appreciate that. I wish these people, when they give the written comments and address not provided, it'd be nice if someone is in public, they would give us their address. But I have particular concerns about some of the comments by Mr. Bondbrink you can go ahead and read them, but I think they're a little bit crude, some of the comments, but you go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'll try to edit for more substance rather than commentary, let's say.
Thank you.
Mr. Rankin, Charles Rankin, his comment is, I'm very concerned about the lack of communication to residents regarding potential rezoning of Cool Blow Street in order to transform into a major access thoroughfare to this giant new development. Cool Blow Street was never designed for such use, and the safety of small children who play in the park and attend Meeting Street Elementary should be the zoning department's #1 priority and concern. Not one notice was sent to the One Cool Blow condominium residents, the only residents who live on the street, regarding SCDHAC's public comment period. This is a shame. This is shameful and dishonest and reeks of developer deception. There needs to be an alternative solution found to accessing Laurel Island immediately. And then Mr. Garrett Brink, address not provided. How about you just leave the island alone instead of destroying it with further inappropriate development? Charleston has continually been desecrated by development to onboard a population spike that is not needed nor wanted. Stop ruining what green space we have left and fix what we already have that's broken. Flooding and infrastructure. Enough of my tax dollars have gone to other uses. You are letting the city's future be dictated by people who don't live here or don't appreciate what Charleston actually is. And I did edit that for some family hour item. So there we go. And then we have a letter from the Preservation Society. Are we reading that now?
Christopher, I believe she's here and has signed up to speak, and then also Mr. Jason Crowley. So I have him first on the list if I can find
let's hear from
him.
Mr. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, Jason, you should be able to speak now.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jason Crowley, Director of Communities and Transportation for the Coastal Conservation League. I want to start by thanking the applicants who have taken the time on several occasions to meet with the Coastal Conservation League about their project as they have kicked back up this process over the last year. As Mr. Bello mentioned, it had died down for some time and just came back up, and they did take the time to meet with us. And we do believe that this is an appropriate place for growth in terms of urbanism and growth in our region, for the fact that this is a place that is connected to several different forms of public transportation and walking and biking connectivity. And the Conservation League for several years has been working with partners throughout the region to try and get a regional ferry plan off the ground and implemented to build off from the Daniel Island ferry that already exists and the ferry between Mount Pleasant and downtown. And we believe that that should be a major component to transportation multimodal access for this site as well. One thing that we do have some initial concerns with is the fact that this has come up during the virus and the inability to really engage the community and inform them on this project. The Lorelei project in 2016 is a very different project than this project that's being presented to you all this evening. And we encourage the Planning Commission not to take action on any rezonings or development agreement approvals until there has been sufficient opportunity to really do some substantial public engagement because of the site and location of Laurel Island. This is something that will have a major impact on communities, both positively and potentially negatively, and therefore there needs to be much more community level engagement than we have seen so far. In terms of the designs presented, we think that it is off to a good start, but we do not believe that this is something that should be approved at this time in its current state. While the idea is to try and create an organic type of development that might evolve over time, there isn't any information about individual lots that would be on this property. It's essentially just a skeleton of primary roads, and that could open up the Pandora's box of some negative urbanism. What you could end up with is essentially a giant development full of Texas donut buildings, of what you're seeing of these large scale apartment buildings and office buildings that have been popping up in places like West Edge and along the Meeting Street corridor. And if we want to have a dynamic and diverse development here on this site, then you do need to have more detail about alleyways and different sizes of individual properties in this development. And we encourage the applicants to continue to flesh out this project beyond what was presented tonight. Also, what wasn't mentioned but has been presented in the development plan is related to affordable housing. What has been proposed is only 10% permanent affordable housing. And while we're pleased to see that the affordable housing component is intended to be permanent, we don't believe that in our housing crisis here in this region that that's sufficient. And we would encourage to increase that to a minimum of 20% affordable housing to further make this a truly diverse and vibrant community for all affordable levels of income. And with that, thank you all for your time, and we look forward to continuing to be engaged on this project and working and collaborating with the applicants as it moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Who's next, Chloe?
Miss Erin Minnigan. Hold on one second. Okay. Erin, you should be able to speak. No?
Oh gosh, could you hear me when I was talking?
No, go ahead. Why don't you
No, but
start
we can
over?
hear you now.
Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, Erin Minnigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this project and feels pursuing an initial information-only review at this time is prudent given the significance and impact of this proposal. To this end, the Preservation Society is very concerned that to date, there has been no outreach to the nearby impacted neighborhoods, such as East and North Central, the East Side and West Side, Wagner Terrace, and Hampton Park. The mentioned public engagement for the previously proposed project for the site was many years ago. It was a different developer, a different plan, a different time. As one of the largest and most impactful developments in the Peninsula's history, community input could not be more important. And the virtual public meeting format does not allow for the level of input and discussion that workshops or neighborhood meetings provide. And like the Coastal Conservation League, we call on the project team to initiate conversation with neighborhood groups and encourage the Planning Commission to require this outreach prior to returning for formal review. In addition to public engagement, our high-level concerns pertain to land use and open space, building height, architectural oversight, and traffic impacts. First, with regard to land use, there are discrepancies between the area breakdown on page 10 that indicates only 5% of the total area will be usable open space, and the table on page 15 that envisions 20 to 23% of the total space to be open space. The higher percentage is much more appropriate for a development of this size, but this must be committed to in the PUD. Further, prior to formal review of the project, we urge the Commission to require a more detailed land use map showing the proposed location and acreage of each land use type per section 54-255 of the ordinance. Regarding height, we have concern with the appropriateness of 12 stories in this location and its potential to overwhelm Magnolia Cemetery, which is directly adjacent to the site. While nearby UP zoning does allow up to 12 stories, height beyond 4 stories is incentive-based. If this level of height is to be considered here, the PUD should take the same approach. In this vein, given the visual impact of this development from many points on the peninsula, we are concerned by the notion that a 3-member internal architectural review board would be responsible for all design purview of such large-scale development and ask for further consideration. Secondly, because the PUD proposes BAR review of the Laurel Island design principles at a later date, we would ask that parking standards be removed from the design principles. Parking is outside of the BAR scope and should be included for Planning Commission review. Lastly, the proposed access points to Laurel Island via Brigade, Romney, and Coolblow streets will funnel a significant amount of traffic into our existing roadways and neighborhoods. The full traffic study should be discussed in depth with neighborhood leaders to account for potential livability impacts. For instance, how pickup and drop off at Meeting Street Academy on Coolblow will be affected by such a significant increase in traffic volume. Because PUD zoning locks in the most fundamental aspects of development and design upon initial approval, it is imperative that these areas of concern be addressed before this project moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chloe, is anyone else scheduled to speak?
No one else scheduled to speak, and the comment was submitted by Erin, so I think we're good to move on.
Okay. All right. Since we're not taking any action on this, then I guess, Christopher, this is really for information purposes, and there's no action to be taken tonight, but does Mr. Bello want to comment at all, even as applicant with any, and again, he wants comments from us. Maybe we'll go through the commission members and get questions or comments from them. I'd like to start by just saying This is, as everyone said, 196 acres. It's a tremendous piece of property, probably the biggest piece of property we'll have left, I don't know, in the city of Charleston's and development, and we do want to get it right. I'm glad they're talking about reducing the height and also having a lot more open space, but I think they're hearing that they want a lot more public, people are saying a lot more public input, and I think that's what Mr. Bello wants. But other commission members? Mr. Bailey?
I have one question and one comment. And if this is in the materials that have been provided, I'm sorry I missed it with only one screen here. I had a hard time toggling over. But the public spaces, the docks, the parks, the leisure trails, all of those types of amenities that I think I heard Eddie say that'd be available for everyone. Who will own those? Will those be conveyed to the city, or will they be owned by the community association there? And if they are owned by the community association, is there a public access agreement in place?
Go ahead, Eddie. You know what, may be better if we can get, if it's okay, Eddie, you can answer that now. Maybe we get the other commission members with questions and you can answer them all at one time. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be good. I was actually going to pass that question on, but I do want to Robert Clement. But I do want to have a chance later to address a couple of the comments that Aaron and Jason brought up, just so we can have that discussion.
I was going to come back to you as the applicant. I was going to come back to you for some final comments as well.
Okay.
Other commission members, questions, and I'd ask the applicant if we can just keep track of these. We'll answer those as we go along.
Okay, we have Mr. Lassane, Ms. Jacobs, and Ms. Harrison.
Okay, Mr. Lassane?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Bello and Mr. Clement and the team for coming to us for comment before coming to us asking for approval. And I think, you know, that's a good practice, and I'm confident that the engagement that was requested by some of the previous comments, you know, asking you to engage with the community will happen in time, and I encourage you to do that, of course. I just think that as the chairman stated a moment ago, this is a huge opportunity for our city. There have been some other, you know, opportunities like this in the past 15 or 20 years, and some of them have been slow to happen. This one, you know, Robert Clement has been working on this for a long time, at least 15 years. This has been proposed at one time or another to be a golf course, an amphitheater, all sorts of different proposals have come here, a port. And I've spent time on that, all those various iterations, and I think this is the best proposal that I have seen. So just to put it in perspective, Charleston is a growing community. We all know that, and this is the place to develop, as was said. If we're going to grow, we need to develop in the right places, and this is the right place to develop. And I'm just glad to see, you know, the open space, the trails, those street types that were mentioned. Mr. Bello's comment about the importance of the public realm, I think this plan values that, and that's what makes Charleston special, as we all know. You know, that there's some challenges with the site. Obviously, it's a very difficult place to develop. That's why it hasn't been developed to this point. You know, the access to it is difficult, but I think they've presented a reasonable plan that will have to go through public input, and the public's got to weigh in on the bridge and so forth. I do think, you know, I think it's an important point that this plan will incorporate substations that will protect the future of Singleton Park, which is a really important part for the East Central neighborhood. And I think the connections to the coming Lowline project also are important to mention. So I think this is headed in the right direction for all the reasons that were mentioned. And I reiterate my thanks for you to come to us now rather than plopping this thing on us and asking us to
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. Thank you, Mr. Lassane. Ms. Jacobs?
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to reiterate what Harry said about bringing in this to us now, just for us to start digesting it. It is a huge project. It looks to me, I remember Daniel Island and all the work that went into Daniel Island. And even though this is much smaller, it's still large and there's a lot of consideration. I would like to just reiterate too about the public engagement. I think that's important, and you have the challenge of the pandemic with you on that. So I'm hoping that we can navigate that one. And I would like to also consider the affordable housing percentages too again. But I also have one very detailed perspective. When I saw your main boulevard with your dedicated bike lanes, that was very exciting to see where they were literally buffered by landscaping from the trees. But those buffered bike lanes were reduced as you got to, the smaller and smaller streets. And since you have the chance to design those streets like that, I mean, where people are mainly going to be not just transportation biking, but they're going to be biking in their neighborhoods. And if you're going to build with the density and the height that you're suggesting, you might just want to take a little bit of time and tweak those streets to have them buffered for biking and pedestrian too, just maybe widen the sidewalk or something, because I think that's so critical moving forward in this day and age. I just would like to see a little attention to that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Ms. Harrison?
Thank you for the presentation. I have to reiterate everything that everyone has talked about. I would like to kind of focus a little bit more, and I'm happy to listen to what Eddie has to say about the workforce housing component, especially because at 10%, that is a little bit less than what we require on even significantly smaller lots, even though we are talking about a much larger parcel. And so the number would be different, but in keeping with the idea of having 10% and making sure that it's still workforce housing and that it's dedicated workforce housing, I would like to see some mechanism where I know we have the options in our ordinances where you can buy out your workforce housing, but I would rather see something that would be definitively about the workforce housing component actually physically being there, remaining there, and staying there. And if there's any room or opportunity for those numbers to increase to what our current ordinance suggests as far as percentage. But obviously we're still kind of in this stage of understanding and listening but I do think there's some areas that if we're going to talk about workforce housing on this particular parcel, this is one where you want it to firmly be a part of the project and make sure those numbers really are significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Chloe, is any other commission members like to speak on this or questions?
Yes, Ms. Lymphosis.
Okay, Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, Eddie, for that presentation. I agree 100% with Harry. This is the best one we have seen to date. I do have a couple of questions. You had mentioned a red zone on the map, and I don't know if it was just me. I did not see a red zone that had 12 stories, and I don't know where that is located. And then the second item that people seem to forget about in subdivisions all over is guest parking. I don't know what these roads, the size and the width of them and how they're going to operate, but I really hope that we will get, especially in the 8-story buildings, et cetera, a fair amount of guest parking spaces throughout this entire neighborhood. We seem to forget about that. And it really makes it very difficult for these developments to be sustainable without guest parking. So, and I'm with Erica on the affordable. I think that needs to be looked at as well. But I'm looking very excited about this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunday. Any other commission members want to speak? If not, we're going to ask Mr. Bello. Mr. Bello, you've got a lot of questions and good comments, or Mr. Clement to respond to some of this if they would.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for all the comments. I'll go down, and I'm not going to spend too much time. I think they were all really good comments. I didn't like the ones written by the angry people that don't want any development ever. But I think everything that the commissioner said, and the preservation group and Preservation Society and Coastal Conservation League, those were all really good comments. So just to quickly address a couple of them, you know, I hear you loud and clear about more public engagement. That's why we're here. This is a public meeting. We have set up a website that is just went live called meetlaurelisland.com that has this presentation and a lot more information on it. So we need to get that out there. But again, the whole point of this was to get as much public input as we can. As you can imagine, it's very difficult right now to meet with large groups of people. We haven't been trying to do anything secretively. We've met with all the groups that are active all the time. We've met with them 3 times almost a piece. We've met with city council folks. I disagree a little bit. I live in Wagner Terrace. I don't know that Wagner Terrace is going to be dramatically impacted by this, or certainly the west side neighborhood. So I take a little issue with that, but we do hear the comments about as much public engagement as we possibly can. So I think that's heard. Just to respond a little bit to Jason's comments about a little bit more fine grain detail in terms of where the streets go. You have to be careful about that. I think we need to figure out a way to strike a balance with what he's asking for, which I don't think is unreasonable. But I think you don't want to lock the plan in too much where it can't adapt to how, to what future needs are. I mean, he talks about Texas Donuts. I hate those too, which, in case everybody doesn't know, you put a parking garage in the middle and you build all the way around it. And you got this giant mass. Who knows? In 10 years, we might not even have cars. So you don't want to get too detailed into what we know now that we can't, we just can't anticipate in the future. So maybe we can figure out a way to codify some of the language that limits the size of the city blocks or drills down on the scale or something that, I know Jason's concerned with, and that's what makes the development better anyway. So I think we just need to work through that. Aaron mentioned a definitive land use plan. I'd have to say I'd like to hear if there's a comment from the commissioners, but I don't want to define this area personally. I don't think it's appropriate to say this whole area must be residential or this whole area must be office use. I think that's naturally going to occur a little bit just by the heights, but I think we want to have a mix. We want it to be very, very diverse. I mean, that was in one of my early slides. And this isn't all going to be built tomorrow. This is going to be built over a period of time. So it may be that the first project is a very small office building and then a multifamily that's across the street. And so I'd much rather have, personally, as an architect and someone who lives here, 2 buildings on a street than have an office building and then way over on the other side, this standalone multifamily building. We're trying to create a space. So I think the natural inclination, I would think, would be to build kind of in concert with one another in terms of how these developments will work. So not super criticizing that, Aaron, but I just think you've got to think through. I don't know that we want to define that too much. Planning-wise, it doesn't work as well. Again, there's some concern about the heights. Across the street is 12 stories. The reason we have so much open space is because we pushed it all in so we could go a little bit taller, and we're not going taller on the whole island. We're only focusing on a couple of areas. Right now, the whole area, the whole island can be much, much taller without any change. We can just come in with tall buildings. So I understand the concern about heights, but I just think you got to look at the big picture. And Ms. Lymphosis, what I was pointing to, there was a big area that's red. That's basically the whole island. And there was an area, I think, that was green and one was purple or something. But it basically was the county site, which is 85 feet, which is about 7 stories. And then the little teeny piece that is in between that is 12 stories. So I'm sorry if I was confusing about that. And I think I will wrap up. I do want to get back to Jimmy's comment. Ms. Jacobs, I think I hear you on the bike lanes. There's a struggle between making streets so wide that you have bike lanes and but then not so nice of a street, and then having those bike lanes. So one thing to remember is everywhere on this island, there's going to be that path that you connect to. So all those main streets connect to that path. So if you're on a bike, you can quickly get to where you need to go without any cars. But anyway, point is we'll study that. And so I guess the way I want to wrap up on one thing, again, we do have that website. We're trying our best to get as many public comments as we can. We're going to continue to meet with other groups. And then the one question I don't know that I have a good answer to, and maybe Robert can answer if he wants to, is Jimmy's comment about how the parks and open spaces will be controlled. And Robert, I don't know if I just don't know.
Take this on. I take this on. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you, sir.
Those things, Mr. Bailey, will be owned by the city.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Clement.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Bello, I don't want to cut you off. You finished, Mr. Bello?
I think I've talked enough. Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, no, it's good to hear.
Hear me out.
It's good to hear. Chris.
And Charlie, Eric Schultz with our zoning division wanted to say something, so I promoted him to panel.
Great, thank you. Mr. Schultz?
Yes, thank you. As I sit here in my lovely home west of the Ashley, I just wanted to commend the team. Obviously, as TRC administrator, I've seen this in front of our committee a number of times, and I believe that they have taken every comment that staff has put forth to heart. I physically have taken photographs from Magnolia Cemetery. I've taken my boat out to get near the edge of this landfill site. And I think the green space that they're showing on this exhibit in front of you right now is very important. The leadership of the city in the past and the present encourage the development and the enhancement of the water's edge. I live near the North Bridge, and that small little park is basically overrun with people because it's an opportunity to engage the water. And I just think that they've done an incredible job respecting the historic structures, providing that open space on the water's edge. And TRC continues to look forward to commenting on the project as it moves forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And I want to thank you as well, not only for your comments, but you're all over doing work for the city. So I appreciate your hard work on behalf of the city of Charleston.
Thank you.
I don't know, Chris, I guess we were going to close it out from commission members. I did want to say, Mr. Bella, if you keep us informed when these information sessions, I know with the pandemic, we're having a problem getting everybody together. Anytime there's meetings, if you let Chris know to let the commission members know, I know I'd love to attend. This is so important. And I think Mr. Lassane and everybody on the commission says, this is a big piece of property. We appreciate the fact that we're going slow because the biggest thing is we all want to get it right. That's all we want to do is get it right as you do.
Right. That's right. And
thank you.
I think,
go ahead.
I said I wasn't going to say anything else, but I think the good thing is we have now something for people to respond to. I think it could be much more efficient. I've been in a lot of meetings where a lot happens and there's not much that comes out of it. So I think we can be more efficient now that people can respond to what we put together.
Thank you, Mr. Bello, and thank you for your team's work. Chris, I guess we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We'll go on to ordinance amendments. Number one, an ordinance to amend Chapter 54 of the Code of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance by replacing Part 16, cluster development, of Article 2, land use regulations, with a new Part 16, conservation development, of adding relevant definitions to Section 54-120 of the zoning ordinance. Now, I know who's going to present on this, Chris?
Well, we can go through the full background on it, but I knew that there had been some comments from commissioners in advance of the meeting asking about the potential for deferral on this. I don't know if you want to open it up to hear from your full commission before discussion or not.
Well, if we're going to, I think there is, Ms. Jacobs, did you want to talk about that? Or I know you had I didn't want to go through the whole thing if we were going to have it brought back to us in a different form, just for the sake of time. But I know there's been some discussion on this item, and some commission members had a concern with moving forward this time. Did anyone want to speak on that on the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to speak on that, if you will.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like for the commission to consider deferring this ordinance back to the Community Development Committee. I have spoken quite extensively with you, Christopher Morgan, Councilman Jackson on this, mainly because this ordinance is an ordinance that speaks to a subdivision where we have extensively tried to figure out a way for subdivisions to be at staff level review only. And if we're going to consider that, maybe this is the place to start really considering that. And where the power of getting something right so things can reside with staff is in getting all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted to everybody's satisfaction at the ordinance level. And that way, things that we will be reviewing that would be considering this conservation district would just be reviewed by staff, and we would never have to be concerned about it if we got all the nuances of the ordinance correct. So I would like to recommend that we do defer this back to the Community Development Committee. I could compose a letter, the things that I have concerned about back to the committee. But I really would like to see us approve this in such a manner that this ordinance would leave conservation districts at staff level approval. And that was that's my biggest level without going into a lot of detail.
So your motion is that we defer this, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and I think, Chris, in talking to staff, again, we're gonna get some other comments, or we need a second, obviously, from commission members. Chris, staff is okay with that as well, agree with that?
Yes, I would recommend, if you're deferring it, some guidance on a deferral, such as Ms. Jacobs said, going back to the CD committee, because I think, without the planning commission saying they'd like CD to review it again, they might say, well, we've already reviewed this. So I think a motion that said something along the lines of what Ms. Jacobs said, defer back to the CD committee, I think would be very helpful.
Okay, and I think that's the motion you made. Is that correct, Ms. Jacobs?
That's correct. And I could add a bunch of comments to that about some things that I would like to see them re-look at. And then I'm sure the public has comments to that also.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to defer, or other comments from commission members?
Charlie, I would like to, I have been discussing the cluster development and how it has not worked out the way we anticipated it. But there have been some situations where it has worked out perfectly. So I think that, a little bit more thought needs to go into that cluster development. It definitely needs to be replaced. And I really haven't quite gotten all the information that I need to look at for this. So I think I'm definitely in favor of deferring this.
Okay, so you're seconding that motion to defer?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Other comments or commission members? I don't want to cut anyone off. If anyone has a comment, that's great. Otherwise, we'll take a vote. Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and There's a motion to defer ordinance amendment number 1. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Ms. Lemphasis?
I in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so that's unanimous to defer that. Ordinance amendment number 2 is an ordinance to amend chapter 54 of the Code of the City of Charleston, zoning ordinance to incorporate provisions to allow subdivisions and developments of single affordable housing as a conditional use within multiple base zoning districts as amended. Mr. Morgan?
Mr. Chairman and Christopher, before you start, I just wanted to say to everyone who was signed up to speak or who submitted comments for ordinance number 1, those will be carried over to the next time that this item is on the Planning Commission agenda. So if you've already submitted a comment, that will be carried over you providing your comment.
Thank you, Chloe. Appreciate it. Who's going to be presenting on ordinance number 2?
I believe Mr. Lindsay is going to have information on this for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the members of the Planning Commission, I really, as always, want to say how much we appreciate your service to the community. I'm going to honor that service tonight by being brief in my comments on both of these items. So first and foremost, Christopher, if you could release the screen share so that I can bring up, thank you, or maybe you have the same ones that I do. Hold on just one moment. So if I can just get this screen share up and bear with me, here we go. Okay. So you all should see these slides, and I'd like to just give a brief preamble to this. 3 years ago, my department, along with Ms. Shaw Johnson's Department of Housing and Community Development, began to look at how we could streamline the approval of affordable housing. One of the key things that we identified after an exhaustive analysis of the affordable housing projects that she has brought forward in the past is that there is a major hurdle, a barrier to building affordable housing that has to do with the hearings before our Board of Zoning Appeals for minor lot requirements, things like setbacks, frontage requirements. These projects have to go before the board for these very minor site-related matters that are not substantive in nature, but they add time and cost. And they've actually caused some really good affordable housing projects to fail in the past because of that additional month or 2 months and the additional design fees that are necessary to prepare the documents. So this proposal, and you all have reviewed a version of this previously, by the way, does a couple things to help speed up the delivery of affordable housing. First thing is that it applies citywide, and it adjusts the lot standards only for affordable housing projects. This doesn't apply to anything unless it qualifies as totally affordable. And this is really about single family houses on single family lots. It gives flexible lot standards in these single family categories. And additionally, it applies in these other multifamily categories. Now, there's a couple things it doesn't do. It doesn't change the standards for all housing. Right, the base zoning standards remain for market rate. This is only for affordable. It doesn't change the subdivision standards for market rate development, and it does not require that all new housing be affordable. Now, we have had this reviewed many times by our CD committee, by staff, and we are bringing this back to you after some revisions. And first of all, we have required that 2 off-street parking spaces have to be provided for every unit, just like in our regular zoning code. And we have put in an exception for Ashleyville, Maryville, after having met with the neighborhood organization and met with residents of Ashleyville, Maryville, discussed these matters with them in depth. They feel very strongly about maintaining the minimum 50-foot frontage. And you will see in this ordinance that there's an exception written in for Ashleyville, Maryville. So that component remains in place. This does not violate the 50-foot frontage that is an important component of Asheville-Maryville's lots. We've added a provision for one family attached dwelling units, so there can be townhomes in the diverse residential categories. And we've also added a provision for the traditional Charleston court, which is what you find downtown where lots are subdivided. These are really a great set of changes that are minor in the context of the whole city, but they really matter in our ability to deliver affordable housing. And we can go into the details of the ordinance as you see fit, but I'll end my comments at that point and we can go to discussion or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Is there anyone scheduled to speak on this ordinance, Chloe?
Yes.
Okay.
So first speaking in favor, we have Ms. Shaw Johnson.
Okay, let's hear from her.
All right, here she is.
So Chair Karish and all of the members of Planning Commission, thank you for your efforts to advance the cause of affordable housing in the city of Charleston. And I certainly want to commend Jacob and his team for thinking outside of the box and allowing us to remove barriers to the development of affordable housing. I don't have to tell you all about the need, the prevalence of the need for affordable housing in our community. That need has certainly been enhanced by the fact that we are now in a pandemic, and at this time there is no sight to when that will end. Beyond that, this ordinance literally enables us to move forward in many ways on a number of projects that we are contemplating. It allows us to get those things done more expediently. I would simply say to us that in the affordable housing developments, there are not large margins. Typically, these developments come with budgets that are very tight because we are targeting persons at varied income levels, but certainly sometimes at the lower spectrum of the economic income level. And so being able to move these through quickly, expediently, certainly with all of the provisions of ensuring aesthetically that they are pleasing, this ordinance helps us to do that. So I would certainly ask for your support of it. And again, I thank staff for all that they're doing to help advance the cause of affordable housing in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's next, Who's next, Chloe?
Next in favor, speaking in favor, we have Mr. Leahy.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I'm saying that right. You should be able to speak now.
Yes, you are saying it right. Thank you. My name is Rob Leahy, and I want to thank you all for giving me a few minutes here. I'm actually submitted a comment related to point 7 under zonings, but I wanted to speak here because during the late 80s, I was on the Spartanburg County Planning Commission during the period when BMW came in, and we actually rewrote the entire code over that period. Mr. Lassane, I think, will remember that period. But it was a lot of fun. So I appreciate the work you do, having endeavored to do it myself. The reason I'm speaking is in researching this, the gap in in your code for affordable housing, and trying to answer the questions related to point 7 later, I really felt that based on what I saw, you don't really have a code for the affordable housing the way you want it to be, because when your code was written, there was no real need or understanding for the purpose of affordable housing. So you really should look at modifying your code as it is earlier presented. So thank you very much for my time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Is I think Mr. Roberts, we have Mr. Roberts going to speak as well. Chloe?
I'm not, yes, he's signed up. I'm not seeing his name on the participant list.
Okay.
Jeffrey, if you're on there by another name, if you could please raise your hand, I'll give you some seconds to do that.
We also had, we can come back up. We also had some written comments. Is that correct? Do we need to read those in?
Yes, that's all we had signed up or submitted for folks in favor of the ordinance amendment. And now if we wanted to move to those in opposition, we have Ms. Higgins signed up to speak. So I'll enable her microphone. Ms. Higgins, you should be able to speak now.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yes.
To the planning commission members, the chairperson and city staff. I'm not really speaking against the ordinance.
Ma'am, could you speak up just a little bit if possible? I'm just having trouble hearing. If you could speak up a little, that'd be great.
Okay, is that better? Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you. Yes, that's better.
Not really speaking against the ordinance, but requesting that the staff and all those involved in developing the ordinance take another look at the exception for Ashleyville and Maryville. And as many of you know, this ordinance has been before you before in 2018 and 19, and it was not approved. It was also before the city council in 2019, and they upheld the planning commission decision not to approve it. I'd like to just call your attention to 3 aspects that requesting that should be added to page 3 at the end of number 4, the statement of exception for Maryville and Ashleyville. And that is that a minimum lot size of 50 by 100 feet. This was addressed when the January 2019 ordinance was being considered by the Planning Commission and the City Council. This is very important to the history of our community and was a major factor when this area transferred into the city of Charleston. Matter of fact, that was a request that we maintain that standard of a minimum lot size of 50 by 100 feet. However, we couldn't support it because we could not find that it was documented. And that's what we were told. So this is why we're asking now that it is documented to show that we should have a minimum lot size of 50 by 100 feet. Number 2 that we're asking to add is that there should be single family detached houses only. I noticed you changed the wording of the ordinance. At first, it included that there would be detached, single family detached affordable houses, and that was taken out. But we ask that you include in the exception statement for Ashleyville and Maryville that we have single family detached houses only. In the history of our community, it has been that there should be no apartments. We do have 2 apartment buildings at the entrance on Sycamore. These were grandfathered in many years ago. There should be no condominiums or attached housing in our community. There should only be single family detached houses. This maintains the historic character of our community, and it has been addressed before when the ordinance was first presented in 2019. And also when sharing the history of our community. We feel that it's very important to maintain this aspect that we have single-family detached houses only. And for number 3, to also add the requirement for averaging surrounding lot frontage shall apply per section 54-824 C1. And this refers to the development or the subdivision of new property, that all properties around it, that the subdivision should be based on the average size of those properties. We do have a particular incident here, a situation in Ashleyville that applies to. And it went before the Board of Zoning Appeals in May, around that time. But anyhow, we spoke up so that this zoning requirement would continue to protect our community through an appeal dated May 29, 2020, I'm sorry. And we filed that appeal and we won the appeal. And we're asking that this is added so that we can continue to protect our community from becoming
Ms. Higgins, are you still there? I'm losing you.
The applicant of this appeal was Councilman Waring. And of course, because the appeal was won, he would have to submit his new item. And of course, he has never resubmitted the application to the Board of Zoning.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Higgins. I don't want to cut you off, but will you finish? I didn't want to cut you off now.
I'm finished, but they don't have problem hearing me. If you have any questions.
Chloe, I'm missing some of this. Are we okay, or?
I'm also not able to hear.
Well, I think we got, Ms. Higgins, I think we heard most of what you, I apologize, we're just having trouble with communicating. I think we got most of it. We wouldn't want to cut you off. Okay. We're having a tough time in communicating.
Do you have any problems hearing?
Yeah, we're still having problems, so
maybe what we can do, Charlie, is I'll put her on mute for now, and we can go to the written comments.
Let's do
and
that.
if Ms. Higgins didn't get to finish, then she can raise her hand later before we close out the public hearing.
That's a good idea. How many? We have a ton of written comments. It looks like there's 16. Can we?
Yes.
Who's going to read those? Christopher?
Yes.
Can you surmise, Christopher, can you surmise those? I don't know if they're long comments. I mean, I'm not trying to cut anybody off just for the sake of time.
Not super long. I can go through those pretty quickly.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so from our Corsoma Brooks White at 831 Burger Street, we have please add the following to page 3 at the end of number 4, statement and exception for Ashleyville, Maryville, and a minimum lot size of 50 feet by 100 feet, single family and detached houses only, and also the requirement for averaging surrounding lot frontages per section shall apply. I'm owner and rightful descendant of Reverend Nathaniel and Mildred Brooks Sr., who reside in this home for over 58 years. Any questions, please advise. The next one is Caroline Brown at 833 Burger Street. Adhere to the minimum lot size, 50 by 100. Detached single family homes should only be permitted. C, John Carr at 1039 Main Street. We as longtime community members in the Ashleyville neighborhood would like to continue to enjoy our quality of life. Ashleyville and Maryville would like to keep their lot sizes a minimum of 50 by 100 single family detached family homes only. Why do we as a lifetime community members have to continuously fight this battle with invaders that don't live here, have never lived here, and interested only in monetary gain? This ordinance would change our neighborhood to something it's never been. Then next one, Cynthia Galliard at 930 Main. Please add this to page 3 and number 4, and a minimum lot size of 50 by 100, single family detached houses only, and also the requirement for averaging. So we've heard this before. Neighborhood is crowded as is, and parking is already a problem. Single family detached units are welcome, but you consider the lot size and parking. Thanks. Ms. Higgins has her comments, but I believe you've heard from those already. Then we have Georgia and Galliard on Burger Street. Considers the minimum size lot of 50 by 100. Please make clarify that size be required for Maryville, Asheville, single families detached housing only. The neighborhood is already currently small based homes on size of homes and parking spaces that would be acceptable to add multifamily housing. Then Mr. Greg Hardy at 819 Chickadee Avenue. Statement for exception, Maryville, Asheville, minimum lot size of 50 by 100, single family detached only. Also like to see added the requirement of averaging surrounding lot frontage per section 54842. Appreciate the planning commission procedures and hearings. I hope you respect these wishes. Ms. Della Jordan at 1040 Main Street to add to page 3 at the end of number 4, statement for exception for the 50 by 100 foot lots. Things should remain the same. Rosalie Rush at 1002 Main Street, remain a single family residential area with a minimum lot size of 50 by 100 with attached garage. The area has become extremely congested and cars parked in the street unable to get by because of space. And then we have form letter attached by 7 individuals signing similar statements as these above, from Lehman Lawyer at 809 Minnie Street, Thomasina Moore at 849 Tribe Street, Mr. and Mrs. James Smalls at 945 Sycamore Avenue, Brenda Beal at 822 Main Street, Janet Ansley at 840 Minnie Street, Johnny Starks at 841 Tripe Street, Hester Robinson at 926 Fifth Avenue, and Deborah Capers at PO Box 32103. That's all.
Yeah, so you and Mr. Lin, I guess Mr. Lindsay want to respond, kind of the city's applicant to change this with any of the comments, to give us any more information on some of the comments that were made?
Well, I'd be happy, Mr. Chairman, to briefly respond to some of those.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So first of all, I'd like to talk about the matter of attached units and in relation to Asheville, Maryville. The vast majority of Asheville, Maryville is zoned SR, single family residential, which does not allow attached units. There's only a little bit of DR, diverse residential, which allows attached. That's a vast minority of the zoning categories in that neighborhood. The proposal that we have in front of you does not allow townhomes or attached dwellings in the SR category. So nothing about this would allow additional attached dwellings to be built in Asheville, Maryville that cannot otherwise be built today under the current zoning. There is no change to that status. That's important to know. The second item is that the matter of the minimum lot sizes is only tangential to this ordinance as well. The lot frontage is in fact prevented from changing in the ordinance. We have made sure there's an exception there. The lot depth is also something that we've addressed with the residents. That minimum lot size and the subdivision standards related to it could be modified through the subdivision ordinance, which is a totally separate process to this one. But there's an important point that we've observed in Asheville, Maryville, which is that the 50 by 100 lot size is a sort of a thumbnail, a rule of thumb, a general concept. The surveyed lot depths and sizes are rarely exactly that size, right? That doesn't really occur in our city where you have exact lot subdivisions. It's a rare thing. So this ordinance is not going to permit the rapid subdivision of properties from the existing lot pattern. That's not what it does. It allows affordable housing projects that need minor variances to skip that process. So it's not gonna cause that kind of change in the existing lot pattern. It would not have that effect. It cannot have that effect. So we understand those concerns. We know that residents don't want subdivision of those lots, and that could be addressed further through the subdivision standards themselves. But they're only partially relevant to this. So that's our response to that. We have looked into these matters in some depth, and if Mr. Morgan has any additional comments, I would also invite him to weigh in on that.
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, anything else from you on this? And again, I appreciate Mr. Lindsay pointing out, because Asheville, Maryville was majority of what we heard and concerns about that, and it sounds like they are secure with this ordinance being changed. I mean, it's not going to change their situation. But Mr. Morgan, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Mr. Lindsay covered it all well.
Okay, great. That's going to close the public aspect of this, and I ask commission members to comment, questions, motions, whatever's appropriate. Mr. Lassane, did I see you?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend two groups here.
You froze, Harry. Can anyone
Harry,
else?
we can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Try it again, Harry.
Sorry, my internet keeps saying it's unstable.
Harry, excuse me for a minute. I've been told that if your internet's unstable, if you turn off your video, we'll probably be able to hear you. And I think that might be okay just for the purpose of this. So maybe turn off your video and then we'll be able to hear you better.
Yes.
Try this.
All right now, Mr.
Here we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure how far I got along before.
Well, we're breaking up.
Thank
again.
Ashleyville, Maryville for continuing.
We're getting the feedback on Charlie again. Chloe, can you? There we go. Now try now, Harry.
All right, try this once again. If I get cut off, y'all move on to somebody else, and I can maybe come back. But I wanted to thank the residents of Ashleyville, Maryville for coming back again. They've been so diligent about coming to our meetings and making their views known to us. And I was one of the folks who voted with them last time, or the last few times that they came when this ordinance was before us. I also want to thank the staff, Ms. Shaw Johnson and Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Morgan, and all of y'all who've worked on this for staying with it. I am going to support this time, and that's because I believe, as Mr. Lindsay mentioned, that the concerns that Ashleyville, Maryville has expressed, which I think are legitimate, and were the reasons that I voted against this moving forward last time, I think those have been addressed appropriately. And I think the concerns that Ms. Higgins expressed are good, legitimate concerns, but I don't think this ordinance does anything to threaten either the 50-foot lot size or the minimum lot size, or as Jacob mentioned, the single family nature of Ashleyville, Maryville. So I would like to, with those comments, move for approval.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lassane. Is there a second? Other comments?
I'll second that.
Ms. Jacobs, go ahead.
I'll second Harry's motion.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Other comments from commission members? If not, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Limpis has requested to speak.
Go ahead, Ms. Limpis, you go ahead.
I'm just concerned. I know we're passing this right now, and I am sympathetic towards the Maryville, but I'm a little concerned that other neighborhoods will come and also join in. And I think that was Harry's concern the last time we voted on it. And I really do appreciate the Ashleyville, Maryville people for coming in again. And this really has nothing to do with them. It has to do with whether or not other subdivisions want to join in on this. And then we're sort of defeating the entire purpose of why we're doing this. If they can just arbitrarily come in at a time and add their name to be exempt from this ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Lampsis. We're going to go ahead and continue. So I had Mr. Bailey was in favor, I believe. Ms. Harrison?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and vote in favor of the motion. I think. Thank
you, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm
sorry, Ms. Harrison. You go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. No.
Okay, I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson, you with us? Might have lost her.
No, she had to hop off. She's not going to be able to return for the rest of the.
Thank you. Ms. Lampasas?
I'm really not in favor of this as it's written right now, so I'm not opposed to it, but I'm really not comfortable with the verbiage in here, and am concerned about others coming in and wanting that exemption. So I will vote not in favor.
Okay. Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
Okay, and I'm in favor of the motion as well, so that I believe is 7-1 that this motion would pass. The next item on the agenda
6-1.
is,
6-1.
I'm sorry?
It's 6-1 without Ms. Johnson. So
Oh,
it's
I'm sorry, 6-1, I apologize. Yes, sir, 6-1. The next item on the agenda was ordinance number 3, ordinance to amend chapter 54 of the Code of City of Charleston to amend the definition of half-story accessory building and accessory dwelling unit and incorporate provisions to permit accessory dwelling units within all base zoning districts in the city of Charleston. Is this Mr. Lindsay as well?
Yes, it is.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So again, very briefly, an introduction here. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the concept of the accessory dwelling unit. I think there was a time when this was a new idea in cities, and today it's been adopted all across the country. And accessory dwelling units do a couple of things. First and foremost, they allow us to add to the housing stock. So we have more housing supply, helping us to meet demand, and that reduces housing cost across the board, which is a great thing for our community. This also gives an additional income source to someone who resides on their own property. They can build an ADU, they can rent that ADU, and they can receive the income that comes from doing that without having to resort to a short-term rental, which thankfully, we've already dealt with. So this is really an affordability measure, and it's been adopted by cities across the country. It's also been adopted by our neighboring governments. The town of Mount Pleasant has had an ADU ordinance in effect for years. Charleston County has an ADU ordinance in effect. So this is really just bringing us up to speed with what our neighboring governments have already done. And a couple of key points that I'll just verbally walk through in regards to accessory dwelling units. First and foremost, if this is for houses that reside on lots, that's the first thing. And it's not something that doesn't apply to condominium or apartment building or anything like that. This is for houses that sit on lots. It's permitted in single family zones, and you've got to have the space on your lot to build an accessory dwelling unit. It's got to fit within the setbacks and all that. You got to have the space to do it. So for example, the French Quarter, who've already sort of reached out about this, this doesn't really effectively apply because I don't think there are going to be any lots in the French Quarter where you've got enough space to build an ADU, right? So this is really for areas where you've got space on your lot. And it only permits one ADU per lot. You can't build 5 ADUs outside your house. It has a maximum height of 1.5 stories, except in the Old City District where it's going to be governed by the Old City height districts. The maximum size of the ADU in this ordinance is 850 square feet. So that's really probably a 2-bedroom unit at the maximum. There is a maximum number of occupants, which is 2 adults. And this specific provision was discussed at some length with the CD committee, the Community Development Committee of Council, from whom you are receiving this ordinance. The CD committee has reviewed this and you are receiving it from them. So the maximum provision of 2 adults was something that they discussed and added. In addition, 1 parking space is required for an ADU. So you can't have it without the parking. The owner has to reside on the property. It's just like a short-term rental in this regard. So the owner of the property can either reside in the main building and rent the ADU, or conversely, the owner of the property could build an ADU, move into that, and rent the front house, the main house. Those are both options, but the owner must reside on the property full-time, just like a short-term rental. You can't have an ADU as a, you can't have an ADU in the main building as 2 separate rental properties. That doesn't work under this ordinance. It's not for profit, it's for affordability. You can have separate power meters. You cannot convert it to condominium ownership. The ADU has always got to remain as an accessory to the primary dwelling. And in conclusion, I'll end on this important factor. This is the last thing I'll give an introduction, which is that the Community Development Committee felt strongly that there should be an affordability requirement. And they have placed a restriction on the income level of the renter. If the unit is rented, the CD committee has requested that the renter have to qualify at 80% of the AMI. So that's a cap that is on the affordability. So if someone makes 120% of the AMI, they would not be able to rent an accessory dwelling unit if it was built. However, if the person is not renting it, if they're a relative, if you want to build a mother-in-law suite and have your mother-in-law live in it without paying rent, obviously there's no income restriction in that regard. But if it's rented, CD committee feels that it should be limited to 80% of AMI. And last, this is actually the last thing. If you have an ADU, you can't use it as a short-term rental. And if you have a short-term rental, you can't use it as an ADU. Never the twain shall meet. So this is not a backdoor STR ordinance. So that's my introduction, and we can go into details of this if you see fit. Here to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Boy, if your mother-in-law is going to live there, at least charge her a lot of rent. Anyway, do we want to hear from Ms. Johnson? Wants to be heard on this, Chloe?
Yes, sorry. Tracking.
I do, and thank you. We see this as one additional.
Gianna.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
So we see this as one additional tool in the toolbox to help meet the need of affordable, what we anticipate as rental housing in our community. We also manage and oversee what we call a rental rehab program in my department. We feel like this provision would allow us to even advance that program and provide an additional incentive to the homeowners who want to build. To Jacob's point and comments about this, they have to, of course, target those persons or provide homes to those persons who are making 80% and below. And we're willing to even put additional funding that would help them to construct or reconstruct a building on their property that help meets this need. So we're very much in support and would ask that you support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. It looks like there's one comment. Is that correct on this? One written comment, Chris?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I
go ahead and read that for the record.
Okay. It is from Susan Milliken on James Island. Her comment is, please add to this decision the ability for the Planning Commission to have this ordinance not apply to base zonings on the Sea Islands, James Island, and Johns Island. If this is not feasible today, please defer this item for more study. Increased accessory dwellings must be disallowed on the Sea Islands of Charleston, James, and Johns Island due to our present flood zones, low-lying properties, and the reality that more building and impervious surfaces going down will most definitely cause more flooding. Higher density is not feasible on the Sea Islands due to low-lying flood-prone land.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Lindsay, did you want to address that? It sounds like they would have to meet all the guidelines for building or doing a renovation with flood guidelines anyway for that comment, but you want to address that?
The same city standards would apply to an ADU as would apply to a house. So all the standards are in application here.
Mr. Bailey's raising his hand.
Mr. Bailey, you go ahead.
Jacob, you talked about how we're kind of catching up with neighboring municipalities and many others have done this. Have others included that income limitation? Because I was listening along and thinking that the committee had done a really good job thinking about everything possible that could be a downside. And then it got to that. And I don't even see how that works.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. The Mount Pleasant and Charleston County do not have an income limitation.
Okay.
Can you walk me through why that wound up in the recommendation?
Well, I'll do my best to summarize the comments of the CD committee. I think that they feel rightly so that we need to do everything we can to get more affordable housing in the city of Charleston. And they viewed this as one of the methods to do that, to have this requirement placed on these. I think that summarizes their opinion. And obviously the ways to obtain affordable housing can, there are many ways to do it. And they felt that one way is this income cap.
Well, I would just say that I completely agree with trying to do everything we can to promote affordable housing, but that provision alone will probably cause me to vote no. I think that'll cause me to vote no.
And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess we could approve it without that provision in there, but let me get some other comments. Sunday, you had your hand up?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Bailey. And I am absolutely for any way that we could get affordable housing in the city of Charleston. But this is in direct conflict with the months that we spent on short-term rentals and how we would allow an accessory unit if somebody were an owner occupant. And Jacob, I believe you said that they could either live in one or the other, but this is in really direct conflict to what we had agreed on in the short-term rental. So in our short-term rental ordinance. So I think that everything was good up until the point where we did the affordable housing. So I'm gonna have to vote no on this as well.
Jacob, did you want to chime in?
Ms. Limpsis, if you could elaborate a little bit more about that, I'd like to hear more about your position there, because we think this is in keeping with the short-term rental ordinance. So I'd like to hear a little bit about why you think that's the case, and maybe we could clarify for you if needed.
Well, I don't think that there was ever, I mean, on a short-term rental, that would be weekly rentals or, a short-term rental if you lived on the property and you handled it. And then I don't know how you can base that on 80% of the AMI on everybody that would possibly short-term rental a property. I don't understand how that works.
So it sounds to me as if, like Mr. Bailey, you are also you're opposed to the idea of limiting the income of the renter of the unit. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know how you actually could. I mean, I guess they would have a cap on what you could charge, is what you're probably saying, correct?
That is correct. And the way that this has been proposed is that the city of Charleston every year would certify the ADU permit. So the owner would have to submit for a permit for the ADU, and then they would have to certify the income level of the renter. And then someone at the city would have to verify that, is in conformity with the ordinance.
Well, I think that's I don't know that to me is not what I understood when we did our short-term rental. And because of that, I still am opposed to it. Thank you.
All right, other commission members, questions, comments?
Ms. Harrison has her hand raised, and Mr. Lassane. And then I also wanted to suggest maybe Ms. Shaw Johnson could walk through what that verification process would look like.
But let's hear from I'm with you. We'll hear from her to answer any questions. Ms. Harrison, let's hear from you first.
So I think we've all, well, I've heard about the accessory dwelling unit probably maybe back in 2007, as early as that, and thought this was always an opportunity for owners, but also to stabilize housing, as far as making it affordable to stay in the city. And so by putting the 80% requirement on it, one of the things that I'm a little concerned about, and I would like to really figure out how this was maybe discussed, which is in the discussion of having the ADU, this will be a great opportunity for someone to build it, either for a member of their family, or if they build it, they would rent it out, to another person, and it'd be 80% of the income. But how did that translate in the reverse, which is this will help certain populations remain or make it more viable? Because one of the ways I look at it is in the reverse, which is we want to maintain, diversity in certain areas and parts of the city. But in order to do that, you have to go through all the other regulatory hoops that we just originally talked about, which is BAR, BZA, zoning, et cetera. And so the expense of it makes it, even more taxing and difficult. And so, if the person wants to be able to put a roof on their house, et cetera, you want to be able to charge market rent in order to be able to stay where you are, to pay your property taxes. So I guess my question really is how did they look at it in the reverse, versus we want to provide housing versus we want to maintain, a segment of population here and make it an opportunity for them to be able to maintain and stay in their residences.
Let's go to Mr. Lassane, and then we'll hear from Ms. Johnson.
Well, actually, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, before I speak, I would like to hear, I think Ms. Harrison has some good questions. So if Ms. Shaw Johnson can answer, I would appreciate it.
That'd be great. Ms. Johnson, are you with us?
Unbelievably, I still am.
Okay. See if you can clarify some of these issues.
So, sure. So I think the thought was that, one, we know that we have a need for affordable housing, and this was a mechanism by which to secure that housing. It provided the homeowner who resides at their home an opportunity to garner that additional income that would be derived. And although possibly not as high and naturally not as high as you would receive on a market rate rent, you would still receive a level of income that you're not receiving otherwise. And I think maybe that's where Commissioner Harrison was going to. We do this now with our smaller developers. It is not an accessory dwelling. Typically, we're seeing this with independent properties where they can build townhouses, or they're able to a unit to rental housing. Typically, those provisions are such that at minimum, you have to rent that house out for a year. We do provide that developer, we call them the smaller developers in our community, the information relative to where rents land for those homes. We provide them information, and in many cases, other collaborative partners actually have names of individuals who are looking for apartments on the Peninsula and other places in the city of Charleston. So we do have a system that is currently in place. We feel like although this does not give those homeowners money at a market rate level, it still provides them income otherwise not have. And I think the fact that we're also willing to add relative to the program, our rental rehab program that literally provides $20,000 per unit to help them either build or renovate a structure will cause even more interest in this particular provision.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Any other questions?
Mr. Lassane, did you want to speak now? Or?
Yeah, I would like to speak. Thank you, and thanks, Ms. Shaw Johnson, for that explanation. And I actually I agree with Mr. Bailey and others about this concern. I think, as Mr. Lindsay mentioned when he introduced this ordinance, there are multiple ways that this assists in addressing affordable housing. And the primary way is by increasing the supply of housing. Or more housing, and that increases the supply, which will presumably lower the overall cost for housing. And my fear is that by requiring this 80% threshold, that we're going to remove the incentive of the homeowner to develop the housing at all. And so, Ms. Shaw Johnson mentioned that they work with developers, but these are really not going to be developers building this housing. These are going to be individual homeowners who have enough space in their lot to add the ADU. So I think that I would like to make a motion that we approve approve the ordinance, but delete section F in the ADU portion of the ordinance. So I'd like to make that motion. That we delete
Thank you,
section F in that, in the ADU portion of
Okay.
the ordinance.
Okay. And that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Ms. Lampus, did you want a second?
Yeah, I would just like to
Before
say,
you,
I'm sorry, what?
I raised my hand.
Okay, we'll get you next.
Maybe as a compromise, and I'd like to second Mr. Lasane's motion, but maybe as a compromise that if a homeowner would like to go the route of gaining assistance from Gianna's group and the affordable housing group, and they need the $20,000 or whatever they offer, then you have an option of doing that. And then you then have to live up to the guidelines. And then, but if it's just at a market rate and you pay for it, then I think that needs to be, that the item F needs to be withdrawn from this proposal.
Okay, well, under the motion Mr. Lasane made, it would be taken out, but Mr. Harrison, let's hear from you.
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Lasane. I would like to I would like to amend my motion to include Ms. Olympus's suggestion.
Okay, so it's an optional, so the motion would say that it would be deleted, but the applicant or the owner would have the option to add that in with the incentives?
What it would say is that if the homeowner that wished to develop the ADU wanted the assistance of Ms. Shaw Johnson's office in developing it or in improving their primary residence, that the 80% restriction would be in effect. That's what you were saying, Sunday? Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, you said it well, and it's the homeowner's choice. If they want to gain the financial assistance of Gianna's office, then they have the right to do that. And they have to then live by the 80% of the AMI. But as a general ordinance, know that for their own finances and to build it themselves, it's totally taken out.
Okay, so y'all are clear on the motion and the second, but I want to hear from Ms. Harrison.
Yes. Okay. Just one other thought process, and I want to, and I know that we're in the middle of a motion, but I do want to ask this question of Jacob and Gianna, which is, if we're considering the idea of the 80% and understanding that there are different parts of the city that are not subject to BAR and those requirements, the one thing that I do see about this ordinance is if you have someone who is, we're trying to put affordable in, it's a homeowner, and if they're trying to do this type of scenario, it would it be a deterrent? Because what you're talking about is 600 square feet, but building, or 850 square feet, but it could be a deterrent to do because the cost of actually planning it out and going through the process of getting it approved is much more expensive than actually building it. And was there ever some considerations about how to address that?
Mr. Lindsay, do you or Ms. Johnson want to answer that?
Well, I would say to the commission that naturally, if people are able to make $1,200 versus $800, they're going to go with the $1,200. And so we know that the need for affordable housing is not just in certain incomes, it's across the board. I would just remind us that the need for affordable housing is certainly greater. So naturally, if it's going to cost that homeowner more money to produce that home, they're going to have to weigh the costs and benefits of that in order to facilitate the income or the return that will help them pay that debt to take care of that home and take care of the renovation costs or the new construction costs. So having said that, they're naturally going to want to go for the higher rents, and it just makes sense. If any of us were doing it and it was costing us a certain amount, we would want to naturally consider all of the costs relative to that. Did I answer your question clearly enough, Ms. Harris?
I think my question was more along the lines of if you're below the old city district. I think that's where I'm talking about.
And that,
if you're below Line Street,
yeah,
you've got to get approval.
I'll defer to Jacob on that. But I would also remind us that now we are also incorporating what we call expedited review processes for the construction of housing, which helps get folks through our processes more quickly, which often saves us money. But to specific areas, I'm going to defer to Jacob on that because that's where he is the expert.
Jacob, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Could you restate the question? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it the first time.
So what my real question is that it costs a certain amount of money to build 850 square feet. And if you're living below what is jurisdictionally Line Street, you're going to be subject to BAR and all the other requirements if it's visible from the right of way. So so to begin with that premise, is it possible for this ordinance, if we, and I do agree with where we're going with it, and I want to make sure I recommend to approve it. Is there any way that the Community Housing Development Commission can look at ways to basically not only expedite the process, but streamline it to the point where the expense of going through architectural review does not create a deterrent to actually utilizing this ordinance?
Understood, Ms. Harrison. I think that's an excellent suggestion, and we do acknowledge the additional cost that comes along with building in the historic districts, and we would be happy to look into that if that's the will of the commission and provide those recommendations to council.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Lassane, second by Ms. Lemphasis. You want to be heard again, Ms. Lemphasis?
Well, I just wanted to, Gianna brought up a good point, and she indicated that nobody would really want to do that. But in order to get financial aid from her office, in order to have an expedited process to get approvals, and also Gianna and I have also talked about in the past that there are no impact fees or possibly limited impact fees and or cap fees. So those are things that may encourage other people to want to go with this program. So I think it needs to be as an alternative, and my motion still stands, but it was just a point.
Okay, so we have a motion. Mr. Lassane, just so it's very clear, would you restate your motion? Ms. Lemphasis seconded it, but I just want to make sure for the record that we're all on the same page.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I would like to move for approval of the ordinance as presented, but with the removal of section 52-114 paragraph F. And then with the addition of two things. One is if the builder, the developer, which is wants the assistance of the Ms. Shaw Johnson's office in building that, they would be held to the 80% AMI requirement that's currently in the ordinance that we're removing. And then secondly, I would like to incorporate Ms. Harrison's suggestion that the department do everything it can to encourage the developers of these ADUs to encourage that the city in such a way that it encourages the homeowner to develop these in as affordable way as possible. That's my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. And I think the only thing I'd ask is, instead of you said developer, the owner, I think Ms. Lemphasis said the owner of the property, since it's not really supposed to be a developer, be the owner of the house or whatever. If we can say owner in that, that'd be great. And Ms. Lemphasis, I believe you seconded that motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other comments of commission members? If not, we'll go take a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Great, Ms. Harrison,
I in favor.
Ms. Jacobs,
I in favor.
and Ms. Johnson is gone now. Ms. Lampasas,
I in favor.
Ms. Losane,
I in favor.
Mr. Flug,
I in favor.
and I'm in favor, so I think that's 7 in favor, none against. We're now going to move on to zonings. 416 Riverland. Chris, can we take any of these together? 416 Riverland, Green Acres, James Island, TMS 3431000002. Request single family SR1, zone single family R4 in the county.
Yes, and we can take number 2, 450 Riverland with it as well.
Great, let's read that into the record. 450 Riverland Drive, Green Acres, James Island, TMS 3431000019. Request zoning single family SR1. It was SR4 in Charleston County. Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, bear with me. I got to advance to where we are on my screen share. Okay. Okay, so this is 416 Riverland. This is in Riverland Terrace. It's a quarter-acre lot. It was R4 in Charleston County, and typically we bring those in as SR1 in the city. And then the next one is, there's an aerial of it. And then the next one, we'll do these two together. Here's number 2, 450 Riverland Drive. Again, R4 in Charleston County, coming in as SR1 in Riverland Terrace as well. So recommendation of SR1 for both 416 Riverland Drive and 450 Riverland Drive.
So I don't believe anyone signed to speak on these. So is any questions or motions of commission members?
I move for approval, Mr. Chairman. This is Losane.
Mr. Losane moves for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Jacobs, I'm going to do a roll call vote unless there's any other comments. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
Ms. Harrison, we can't hear you.
Ms. Harrison?
In favor. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Mr. Losane?
I in favor.
And Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so that would be 7 in favor, none against. Number 6, property number 3, property on Savannah Highway, TMS 307-05-00015, request zoning a GB, zone single, it was zone single family R4 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
Okay. This is a property at the front of the Carolina Bay development. When this road, Marginal Road, it originally was immediately parallel to Savannah Highway. And when Carolina Bay was built, it was made into what we call saddle roads because it swung back in this location here, if you see my cursor, to create a situation where you could line up for a traffic signal here, but it also was creating a situation where there could be mixed use development on either side. These parcels have remained undeveloped in the county, but they are immediately adjacent to property that's already zoned GB in the city that already has a development on it and would come into the city under GB zoning. Here is a aerial. Here's the apartment development that's already occurred adjacent to it. Here's Carolina Bay up to the north. This is the site, of course, they would have to work with the existing grand trees and meet all our stormwater standards and go through our design review board. But we are excited to, work with them for a commercial and mixed use development on this site. It is recommended for highway zoning in the Century 5 plan. So that fits right in with what is being requested with general business. And in Plan West Ashley, it was even identified, you see here, as a site that would be mixed use So I think we've got, all our plans point to this being a mixed use hub, and staff is comfortable with the general business zoning and recommends for that.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Do we have Mr. Watkins, Chloe?
He has texted me. I think he had a flight that was coming. The meeting's been running later than we thought it was going to.
Okay.
So if he can't get on, Chloe, can you get him, or is he gone?
He's still here, and I've just promoted him to panelist. I don't know if he's able to. He doesn't look like he's connected to audio.
Okay. Well, all he was going to say, I think, was that he was here for questions, if there are any questions. So let's see.
Okay. We have one written. Chris, we have one written comment. We have one written comment. Do we want to listen to the written comment?
Oh, Mr. Watkins, I think, is speaking. Did we hear him? Mr. Watkins?
I think he's muted.
I'm here.
Okay, it's not working. The audio is not working.
You're breaking up, so
yeah.
Let's do this. Christopher, we had one. Christopher, we had one written comment. Did you want to surmise that?
Yes. Okay. So what the comment says, it's from Jacob Beach, address not provided. I'm opposed to change in property status from R4 to GB. There is a value to having green space in our area. There's far better opportunities for redevelopment of existing commercial businesses in the areas before Dobbin Road or in the West Ashley revitalization projects of DUWOP. If businesses are coming into this area, they should not be seen from the highway. They should serve the neighborhood and not highway travelers. I do not wish to see another fast food restaurant, gas station, car wash, hotel, car lot, or other potential eyesores on this heavily traveled road at the entry to our neighborhood. Please consider leaving this area as a green space, natural area, or additional hidden parking for Carolina Bay residents to access the West Ashley Greenway across the street. Beautiful entranceway to the neighborhood is intrinsic to higher quality of life. Don't cheapen it with yet another building. I understand that McLeod Bradham family has obtained ownership of this parcel, and I ask that they reconsider the rezoning request for these 6.68 acres of land change from R4 to GB, and ask that City Council consider the surrounding areas and keep this entryway non-commercialized. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We're going to close the public aspect of this. I'd love, just my point is, I'd love for a lot of things to be green space, but unfortunately, that's not always doable. So, but anyway, is there comments, questions, or motions by commission members?
Ms. Limpsis raised her hand.
Ms. Limpsis?
You're muted. You're muted, Ms. Limpsis.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Limpsis?
I'm here. I'd like to move for approval, and I'd like to add that that it's I think that Carolina Bay needs to have an area in that development that is commercial or business, because that was one of the challenges that we had in the past, because there was nowhere for them to go to get any kind of ice cream cone or whatever. So I think this is a great addition to the Carolina Bay project. So I'm in favor, and I move for approval.
There's a move for approval by Ms. Limpsis. Is there a second?
I'll second it. And I would just like to add for the record that anything that goes there will be under heavy scrutiny by Design Review Board, which really gets into landscaping and setback from the highway and the structures of the building. So it is even though it's surrounded by residential, it is kind of the commercial entrance hub right there. So it's not like somebody's going to come in and put a McDonald's right to the street. That wouldn't meet any design standards currently in place today. So I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Any other comments or commission members? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Harrison? Great, thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Jacobs? Thank you. Ms. Limpsis?
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
And Mr. Flug?
Aye, in favor.
Great, thank you all. And I'm in favor as well, so that would be 7 and none opposed. We'll go to item zonings 4 and 5 were withdrawn or deferred. Item 6, Somerville Avenue, Peninsula Neck, TMS 46402-00107, 1.4 acres, request zoning of GB, was previously zoned right away. Mr. Morgan.
Yes, so this is a street that is in the middle of a redevelopment called the Lumber Yard, which is a new office location in old warehouses up off the old Somerville Avenue. It's been a very successful project. It's really revitalized a number of older warehouse buildings. And the street there was actually privately owned. And so they purchased it, and they've provided access to other locations along there that had utilized that street. They have easements, things like that. So the street right of way now just needs to be zoned, and it would be zoned the same way as the surrounding area, which is general business. And staff is recommending approval. I think I may have a picture of the site, and this is before it was redeveloped, but it's become very attractive buildings up there, quite an enhancement to the area.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. It sounds like we don't have anybody signed up, but does Ms. Jackson want to comment? Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, she signed up. Yes, she signed up to provide comment on this, but I'm not seeing her
Okay.
in the attendee list.
All right, well, she probably thought we went too long as well. So anyway,
I move for
is any,
approval.
Second.
great, a move by Mr. Bailey, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. Sunday.
Ms. Lempis is second. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey, I'm obviously your approval. You made the motion. Ms. Harrison?
I am in favor.
Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Lempis?
I in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Mr. Flug?
Just from this item and the next item.
I'm sorry? Mr. Flug?
Mr. Flug has recused himself from this item and the next item.
Okay, so the record to show that, and I'm in favor, so that would be 6 in favor, none against. The last item on the regular agenda is number 7, portion of right-of-way at southeast corner of Fishburne and Cumming, West Side Peninsula TMS to be assigned approximately 0.14 acres. Request zoning of mixed-use workforce housing MU-WH, currently zoned right-of-way. And just for the record, Mr. Flug has reclused himself. Mr. Morgan?
Okay, so this we discussed a little bit earlier when we were talking about the Shepherd Street PUD at King Street. And this is property that potentially would come to the city of Charleston from SCDOT, and we would use it potentially for affordable housing. The initial recommendation from staff was for mixed use workforce housing MU1, because that is how we zoned all the areas. And I'm not sure if we have an image. All these areas here, this is Ingle Street that was redeveloped for affordable housing here and over here. That was all zoned MU1 workforce housing. So we thought that that could be a potential zoning for this new affordable housing here, because it has to be on very, very small lots. In other words, the surrounding neighborhood is zoned DR1F. And we'd love to zone it that way, but that requires a 4,000 square foot minimum lot for an individual single family house. And this area is much smaller than that. So the thought was that we would go with the MU1 workforce housing. I think we've heard from some neighbors in the neighborhood, and you may hear from them in the next few minutes. So, you know, from a staff standpoint, if the neighborhood is more comfortable with the surrounding zoning, that just would mean we'd have to get some sort of density variance or lot coverage variance. And, you know, that is an extra step, but potentially we could do that, you know, as long as it's something that makes the neighbors happy. So our staff is recommending for MU1 workforce housing, but we're happy to hear other things as long as we can get some affordable units on these 2 lots.
Okay, Chloe, we have, it looks like in favor, we have Mr. Johnson from the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation. Ms. Johnson, they want to speak?
Yes. I'm going to, there's two FAs. I'm not sure which one is which. I'm promoting both. So FA, you should be able to unmute yourself and also share video if you'd like.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. or Mrs. Johnson?
Are you able to hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, I hear you.
Yes, sir. F.A. Johnson, second with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation. Just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. When the Shepherd Street PUD was being discussed, you heard some comments from Ms. Gianna Shaw Johnson in reference to the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, particularly as it relates to the land trust model and wanting to preserve housing as affordable for a 99-year period at a minimum. The Redevelopment Corporation wants to express its support for this and would be working in conjunction with the city to put 4 units of affordable housing on this property if zoned as intended by staff. I could continue, but I think given the lateness of the hour, I'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate your comments. Chris, we have, looks like we have 6 written comments opposed. Can you please, because of the hour, can you surmise these?
Yes, I will do my best on this. So what we have here is starting here. So Amy Fitzpatrick, address not provided. And Chloe, quick question. Anybody else signed up to speak on this? No other speakers on this, because I saw some raised.
No other speakers. The folks who've raised their hand have submitted comments, and those are included in the packet.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so I'm going to go through these comments. Okay, so Amy Fitzpatrick, address not provided. I'm writing to submit my harsh objection to item 7 on this week's agenda, portion of right-of-way at southeast corner of Fishburne and Cumming. I've been a homeowner on Fishburne since 2013 between Cumming and South Tracy. The area you wish to develop for mixed-use workforce housing is a community park that is frequented daily by residents of this area. It's our only green space south of King Street and north of Lockwood that is not a school zone. This particular area is currently a very busy intersection and hazardous already. Adding a business or housing on the corner is a negligent and dangerous plan. There were near misses with car accidents from people coming off the crosstown 26 onto Cumming Street. There have been pedestrian deaths at this intersection in recent years. As treacherous and noisy as is for current residents. Adding this mixed-use workforce housing is irresponsible and extremely egocentric to think is in the patrons or the proposed business or future residents' best interest. There are far better locations to develop on and off the peninsula. I implore you to look for another location, as I know of no residents in these few block radius that is in favor of this plan. We're the ones that it will directly affect in our daily lives, so our voices should be the loudest. Thank you for consideration and due diligence in looking for an alternative solution, allowing us to keep our park and minimize future risks to our residents. Timothy Gray, who I think has been raising his hand a number of times here, 109 Fishburne. Dear Charleston Planning Board, I'm running to submit my staunch objection to item 7 on this week's agenda, portion of right-of-way at southeast corner of Fishburne and Cumming Street. I've lived on Fishburne Street between Cumming and Rutledge for the past 7 years. The area you wish to commercialize is a community park and is actively used by residents of the area. Several dog owners use this space, including myself. It is our only green space south of King Street, north of Lockwood Avenue, that is not a school zone and closer than Hampton Park Dog Park a mile away. As far as a rationale to allow a commercial property and propose a pizza parlor or cannabis dispensary is not sound. There's a pizza parlor in Ashley, Newland, 1907 feet away. As far as cannabis dispensary, I have low income residents that live across from me on Fishburne that smoke marijuana every day. I have an 8-month-old son and there are multiple children living on the street, not to mention Julian Mitchell School is 2,632 feet away. As far as location, this intersection is extremely noisy and dangerous, with speeding cars traveling well above 55 miles per hour off the connector. A few deaths have already occurred on that crosswalk in the past decade. There are much better locations for the city to develop. Respectfully, Tim Gray. Troy Bishop, address not provided. Dear Charleston Planning Board, I'm writing to submit my harsh objection. This is sounding the same as the other one before. Let me see. The area you wish to commercialize a community park. Yeah. Repeating what was said before. Have a crowded street. We already have a very crowded street. The many homes do not have driveways on my street. Here with the multi-family complex on that corner is that we would see an increased amount of cars that we already have insufficient space to accommodate on our street. Last reason I'm objecting is that it is not in keeping with the other zoning that is currently in our section of the neighborhood. All the homes that are to the west make up our neighborhood, and all are single family or duplexes. This would be one variance that would not be in keeping with in line with what is surrounding us. I believe it would be unfair for anyone to put a mixed use multifamily space in the neighborhood. Thanks to Roy Bishop. Douglas Hickerson at 31 Carolina has something attached. John Sullivan at 104 Fishburne has something attached. Chloe, and then Robert and Cynthia Leahy is attached. So I guess this is at the end. I'll go into those. All right, let's see. Okay, go into this. Bear with me. I apologize. I'm getting through these written comments. Let's see. Here we go. What's that? Sorry.
Christopher, it should be the very last 2 pages.
Getting to it. Sorry. Okay. All right, Doug Hickerson, 31 Carolina. I'm writing to submit my harsh objection to item 7 on this week's agenda. I've lived in and owned homes on Fishburne Street, now on Carolina Street between Cummings Street and Rutledge for the past, looks like it's the same comments. Okay. Yep, they're mentioning the same exact things the other ones did. All right, next one from John Sullivan. I'm writing to submit my objection to item 7 on the agenda. The area's community parking is not actively used by residents of the area as the only green space. It would be extremely noisy and dangerous location for any future residents living there. There are much better locations for the city to develop. And then from Mr. Leahy and Cynthia Odell at 90 Fishburne, which is directly across the street. We're commenting on the zoning classification for the southeast corner. We live directly across from the property being discussed. We have been in touch with the Planning Commission staff and have been very understanding and helpful. We understand the staff recommendation is to receive the land from SCDOT and deed it to a land development trust that will continue to own the land, but lease it to the future owners of the 2 houses. To help me make these houses affordable, the deeds are intended to contain a clause that the land must be used and remain affordable housing. However, there are no assurances that will happen. We believe that planning staff has used the mini development of Ingle Street as a model for the subject property and has chosen the recommended same zoning classification as was used when developing these homes. That classification is MU1 workforce housing. The section of the zoning ordinance describes MU1, and he quotes from the zoning ordinance there. We note the 2 items of concern to us and have highlighted them in the ordinance language. First, the allowance for non-residential use, and second, the apparent lack of requirement for some dedicated parking. While the intention to provide more homes like those in Ingle is laudable, it is our feeling that these 2 parts of the city, while proximate, are not similar. The corner of Cumming and Fishburne Streets, because of its excellent visibility, would be an ideal location for a business enterprise. Clearly, Ingle Street does not have the commercial prospects that the corner under discussion does in the future. The houses built on Ingle Street do, however, have parking, 1 space per house. The zoning chosen for this corner appears to be the least restrictive classification available, provides the city planners great flexibility in developing developer plans. However, simplicity at this stage is not beneficial to surrounding property owners. We propose that the Planning Commission staff recommend a diverse residential DR classification. The concept of affordable housing has stressed the Planning Commission staff's ability to use zoning classifications and address the setback, buffering, parking, and other concerns relative to such housing. We feel that it is inappropriate to use the least restrictive zoning classification, but rather requires future variances to the next most restrictive classification. Or as discussed in today's ordinance amendment discussion point number 2, that was on the agenda earlier, the city should create a class that fully addresses affordable housing. Meanwhile, the adjoining properties to the site under consideration today are zoned DR1F, and we strongly feel that all homes in our street should be zoned DR. Please imagine, if you will, the prospect of a pizza parlor or cannabis dispensary across the street from your house. While the current Planning Commission may not now approve of non-residential end uses, we are discussing the future and times and cities change. The intent of zoning, we believe, is to evolve the neighborhood by accepting changes over time. The ability for neighbors to be involved in the review and consideration of variances are afforded under the DR regulations, but we're not under the MU1 workforce housing classification. This is very significant. Thank you for your service. And that is the
okay. Okay, Chris, do you want to respond to any of those comments? The whole fact that these people keep talking about a cannabis outlet, I think there's special zoning for some of that stuff, but do you want to direct any response to any of the comments?
We do not feel that this is a location that would have a commercial use. There will never, ever be a curb cut along the crosstown. The DOT will not allow that. That is not going to happen. There will not be a curb cut on Cumming Street because that is, you know, a blind spot as you're coming around the corner, and we don't have one across the street. That's just not something that would be allowed. The curb cuts would be on Fishburne itself. We don't think that that leads to a viable commercial use. However, if it, the residents more comfortable, obviously there's been some objection in the neighborhood, I think we would be supportive of the commission amending this request to be DR1F instead of the MU1 workforce housing. It would require an extra step in the process of variance, but if that made it more acceptable to the neighborhood, we don't think as planners that there's any chance that this would become commercial. But again, if it gave the neighborhood more assurance, DR1F is another alternative.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. So we could make a motion that the property be zoned DR1F, which would put some safeguards in, and is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Commission members, comments, motion?
Ms. Jacobs and Ms. Harrison, both raise their hands.
Donna, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move to approve this with the new zoning recommendation that Chris said. I think he said DR1F to safeguard the neighborhood.
That's correct. Okay, so there's a motion to zone this property DR1F. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that. This is Harry.
All right, Mr. Lassane seconds the motion. If there's no other comments, we'll go to a roll call vote. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, F.A. Johnson has raised his hand, and technically he's, technically the city is the applicant for this one, but F.A. Johnson is the sort of partner in the affordable housing developer for this site. So I didn't know what you wanted to do with that.
We'll hear from Mr. Johnson. Go ahead. Mr. Johnson, could you be brief and give us a response?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. With the DR1F that was proposed, create some lot coverage issues for having two houses on that property?
There could be a variance process that would have to be involved depending on the size of the houses and the exact configuration of the two lots. But I think that that is, you know, from the comments we're seeing from the neighborhood, I think they are not comfortable with the MU. So it's planning commission's discretion and then ultimately city council's, you know, final recommendation on it. But from a staff standpoint, you know, we were willing to do the extra work to hopefully get the residents more comfortable with it.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Johnson, so you know, we'll make a recommendation to city council. They'll make the final decision on this. But as Mr. Morgan said, it's possible you could satisfy your need again. He's not saying 100%, but he's saying it's possible. So there's a motion on the floor and a second. Go ahead.
Ms. Harrison wanted to speak.
Ms. Harrison, go ahead.
So, you know, I will eat the charge for being a bad neighbor because I understand that the city is the applicant. So one question I do have before, you know, because I view it a little bit differently because I did work on the project that was on Ingle Street in St. Philip, and how that project worked was because of the base zoning. So with being the new DR1, and I'm talking about the new DR1, not the one with the that we just had first reading at City Council last night and received approval today. Would that actually change, you know, the structure of that, or would he still have to go through a variance? Or would the city still have to go through a variance to develop it as an affordable housing for affordable housing?
Until we know the exact configuration on the lot, we won't know for certain, but it definitely increases the chance that a variance would be needed. by going to DR1F versus MU workforce housing.
So I might, you know, I understand that there is a motion for a second. I will eat the charge of being a bad neighbor because I live on Carolina Street. And I actually have to I walk that intersection to go to my office. And I do know some of the folks who live, you know, directly adjacent to it. The issue really is that if you're trying to do workforce housing, and just as Gianna said, in light of the new affordable housing ordinance that was just passed, you get hung up on the variances, and those are not guaranteed. And what this envelope of base zoning does is allow them to go in without having to go through the process of zoning and get hung up on you know, the minors and the slights or the special exceptions to be able to build something within the envelope of about, I think, 6,000 square feet. And no, there's no possible way. Nobody's going to be turning left from the crosstown, turning in that direction to get to a cannabis dispensary. You know, there's these moments that I think that are extreme, and then, you know, a little hyperbolic. But, you know, like I said, I'll eat the charge for being a bad neighbor.
Okay, I don't know where we're going, but we do have a motion on the floor in a second. I was going to do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Lassane raised his hand. Mr. Lassane raised his hand.
Okay, Mr. Lassane?
Well, I was just going to say in response to Ms. Harrison's comment, which I respect that. The only for two reasons I will support Mrs. Jacobs' motion. One is that the city is the developer here, or the city's the applicant, and I think that the city's got the money to stick behind this to see this project through. And so if there's an issue with the variance, I would trust that the city would come back to us. You know, so that's the first thing. And I've now, because of the late hour, have forgotten my second point. So with that, I just say that I don't think this is, I'm going to support this, even though I respect what Ms. Harrison's comments were.
I got you. Chloe, did someone else want to speak? Was there someone else want to comment? No? No? Then we'll go ahead with the roll call vote.
Okay.
Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
Nay.
Ms. Harrison? Okay. Against? Ms. Jacobs?
Aye in favor.
Ms. Lampasas?
You're muted.
Sorry, I in
Lampasas?
favor. I in favor.
Okay, great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye in favor.
Mr. Flug?
He's recused.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot, and I am in favor, so that would be one reclusal, one against, and 1, 2,
5 to 1 in
3,
favor.
4, 5 to 1 in favor. Thank you.
Can you repeat who seconded that motion?
Mr. Lassane.
I believe
Lassane.
Mr. Lassane seconded the motion, I believe. Thank you. So now we come to election of chairman and vice chairman. Does anybody have a nomination or recommendation?
I move that we keep it as it is right now.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so myself as chairman and Mr. Lassane as vice chairman. Is any other comments or questions or any other motions? We'll accept those as well. If not, we'll go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Ms. Harrison?
In favor.
Ms. Jacobs?
Aye in favor.
Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
Aye in favor.
Is Mr. LaFleur back with us or?
No, sir.
No? Okay, and I'm gonna be in favor as well, so that would be, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say not yet. I don't know if he's planning on rejoining or not.
Now, so it's, that would be 6 in favor. Is that correct? None opposed. Is that correct? Yep,
Sure.
I believe that's right.
Okay.
So the only other thing we have, and it is a late hour, we had an update on continuing education. Can we do this at the next meeting? I'm sorry about opportunities. Can you email those to us? Because it is 8:45.
Right. And we did, Chloe, can we do like a 2-minute update on comp plan items?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
one quick promotion. My friend works for the state forestry, and they do have opportunities coming up in July and September for continuing education units with respect to urban forestry. That the information was sent to Chloe, and I can ask her to distribute to the commission members, because those are 2 opportunities that are coming up right now. Thank you.
Okay, great. And if we can email anything that's updated, or even if the comp plan can be done quickly, I'm not trying to cut anything off, but it is 8:45. Chloe, can you update us very quickly, or can you email us updates? You tell us what you want to do.
Yes, I can do a quick synopsis right now, and just Mandy Herring isn't. I don't think she's here anymore. But what she wanted to say regarding the continuing education is just to remind everyone the importance of that. That's one of the most common FOIAs that the city is getting, is the continuing education record of planning commissioners. And so she's impressing everyone to please be on top of that. And so when I send along opportunities to take advantage. Okay. For the city plan updates. Okay. Just gonna really quickly scroll through these, and I can send this afterward. Can you see the screen? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So very quick updates. We have our branding, as you can see. That's one update. For the data analysis, we're moving along with both our water and land use consultants and our housing analysis consultant. So I'll let you read sort of where folks are on your own when I send these slides along to you afterward. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So just they're in progress. In terms of engagement, we've been analyzing the survey results of the engagement accessibility needs survey. And so that is a how can we engage you in your community survey. As you can see, I have a map here of where we've received responses from. Responses so far, that's a combination of neighborhood presidents, HOA leaders, and also individual community leaders. So before we are finalizing our outreach and engagement strategies, we're first asking people what are the best ways to engage with them and get them involved in the planning process. And so we're approaching a launch online, getting our website ready, online story map, a mailing list to do a newsletter. And then we're also in talks with City Hall about getting a system in place for when it is safe to start to do some no contact social distancing in-person approaches, just recognizing that there are some folks that we cannot reach in using virtual methods only. So we are in talks with figuring out a plan for that, even if it's just a station somewhere where people can come and drop in at their convenience. But wanting to make sure that we get people in person, but approaching that with as much caution as possible. So any quick questions, that's the overall update.
So if you would just email us all that stuff. And again, I hate to cut you off. This is very important, and I know commission members are interested. But again, I have to be somewhere at 9, so y'all can continue. I just have to leave. But
and we may try to set up something with you all in late August for a more complete update and input session. I know our meeting is not until August 19th, but we may look for something that final week of August, maybe a late afternoon or something like that. We'll poll you all for availability, that kind of thing.
All right. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Great. And I see Ms. Lepers is signed. And if anybody's opposed, You'll stand on your own. Thank you all. Have a good night too. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank
Good job. Good night, everybody.